for the record piece. Very good. I call the Assembly Committee of the Whole to order. It is May 4th, 2026 at 6:06 p.m. Ms. Hall, would you mind reading the land acknowledgement?
Thank you, Chair Smith. We would like to acknowledge that the city and borough of Juneau is on Tlingit land and wish to honor the indigenous peoples of this land. For more than 10,000 years, Alaska Native people have been and continue to be integral to the well-being of our community. We are grateful to be in this place, a part of this community, and to honor the culture, traditions, and resilience of the Tlingit people. Ganeshish.
Ganeshish.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Ms. Hendricks, would you note the roll?
The roll is noted, and for the record, you have quorum and Ms. Atkinson is online.
Thank you, Ms. Hendricks. Any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I would just note that that we're discussing both Gold Belt and Sea Alaska at different points in our agenda today. Both of my stepchildren are shareholders in Gold Belt and Sea Alaska. I have discussed both of these items with the attorney, and I will not have any conflict in discussing them.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Seeing no objection to the agenda, we'll note the agenda is approved. May I have a motion to approve the April 13, 2026 Committee of the Whole draft minutes? Ms. Uscandies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moves that the committee approve April 13th draft minutes of the Committee of the Whole and ask unanimous consent.
Seeing no objection, we'll note those minutes as approved. That brings us to our first agenda topic. BLOF mitigation phase 1, reinforcement in phase 2. We have representatives from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers here. Thank you for being here and all your work. But Madam Manager, maybe you could frame us here or kind of get us a little bit organized as we move into this topic.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We do have a lot to cover on this item, so I just want to give you a little bit run of show so that you know what to expect. You have 2 memos in your packet from me, and I will go over those memos after the presentation because I suspect the presentation will kind of ground a lot of that information. But just want to let you know that what I'm looking for from those memos is the first recommendation, which is to authorize building phase 1 HESCO barriers to 63,500 CFS, and you'll learn about it, all of what that means. But I am looking for a recommendation from you on that memo. And the second memo, I'm looking just to start the conversation about long-term funding for HESCO barrier and HESCO barrier maintenance, GLOF, mitigation, recovery and response, because it really is a new service that we are delivering, and we need to think about it in the context of annual funding. So not asking for a recommendation on that second memo, but really acknowledging that we need to start thinking about that for the long term. I only say that so that you can keep in your mind as you listen to our speakers, kind of what policy questions that this whole conversation is driving towards. With that, I would like to invite our friends and colleagues from the Army Corps of Engineers. They have a presentation that's in your packet that is going to give you an update on phase 2 and the work that they have been doing. And then we will hear from our CBJ engineering department on phase 1 and the phase 1 work. If you recall, not so long ago, we all sat in this room and signed an agreement where Army Corps of Engineers agreed to take on phase 2 HESCO barriers, and that meant our responsibility is phase 1. So breaking that conversation up a little bit, but there's a lot of really good information that they have to share with you tonight, not just about the project, but also some of the assumptions that are built into there. So I think if that works, I will go ahead and hand it over to the Army Corps of Engineers. The city clerk here will be advancing slides. City clerk, if you want to pull that up, and then you can just next slide. And we have a table for all of you, so it's you're all welcome to the table.
Hit that button, and when it's green, it's live. Yep.
Test.
Yep.
Okay, is that still all right like that? Okay, great. Are we ready to begin?
Go ahead.
Okay. My name is Mike Records. I am the technical lead for the Army Corps of Engineers for the glacial lake outburst flood work. I'm also a hydraulic engineer with the Alaska District. I'll give a brief overview of our agenda and then I'll let these two gentlemen introduce themselves. So like Manager Kester said, we are going to be looking at both kind of the hydrology of the system and how that informs our risk-based design. And then we'll move into an update on our short-term measures, medium-term measures, and long-term measures. So I'll go ahead and let John and Daryl introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is John Rajic. I work for the Alaska District. I'm the chief of the Geotechnical and Engineering Services branch, and I'll be covering medium-term measures and providing an update on our technical study for the Mendenhall-Gloff system.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Daryl Downey, Army Corps of Engineers. I'm serving as the Phase 2 project manager, working out of our Seattle district.
Next slide, please. So what we're going to talk about next or first is the design, hydraulic and hydrologic design criteria that really feeds into the risk-based design for the short, medium term, and long-term measures that we're implementing or looking at. These are probably most commonly known as things like a 100-year flood or a 200-year flood or a 50-year flood. We really try not to use that terminology anymore, and we try to use it, describe it by annual exceedance probability. So what that describes is in any single year, the probability of experiencing a flood of a certain magnitude. And what's really significant about that is, and I know many of you are experts in hydrology and glaciology at this point, but I'll just describe it anyways, is that in a single year for something like a 0.1, or excuse me, a 1% annual exceedance probability event, which would be the equivalent of a 100-year event, there is a low chance of that happening, but over time, those chances compound. So if you look at the table over at the right, on the right there, you can see the annual exceedance probability events that we developed. These are peak discharge events that we then used in hydraulic modeling to inform decision-making on design. You'll see that a lot of these events are significantly larger in magnitude than anything that's been experienced at this point. But you'll also see that from an AEP perspective, from an annual exceedance probability, on a single year, those are less likely events. Another thing to see in that table that's significant is that confidence interval at any annual exceedance probability, whether that's a 1%, a 4%, or a 10%. You can see that that shows that there is a lot of uncertainty in the system, as we all know. Now I'll talk a little bit about how these AEP events were developed. Normally in hydrology and hydrologic design, you have a long period of record that you use for the development of AEP events. And as we all know, that is a unique challenge here. You know, there's flooding all over the country. It's rare that it develops so suddenly like this. So normally you might have like a 60-year period of record of flood events that you could use to develop your AEPs. In this case, there's basically 3 years of full drainage events, right? There's a slightly longer time period of smaller events. So the way that these annual exceedance probability peak discharge events were developed was based on the physics of the basin and the physical characteristics of the basin. So that's both how Suicide Basin is changing as it expands into the main stem of the Mendenhall Glacier. That's how the Mendenhall Glacier is thinning and the spillway is lowering in Suicide Basin. So right there, you have that push and pull where you have expansion in volume due to the expansion of the basin into the Mendenhall Glacier, calving icebergs, melting of icebergs. But at the same time, you have a volume, the pull against that push, which is the spillway lowering as the Mendenhall Glacier melts. It also takes into account what we know about the local topography and bathymetry under the Mendenhall Glacier, which is quite limited. but that informs the modeling of the expansion of the basin into the main stem of the glacier. And so that's based on both the general shapes that glacier valleys take. I think you all are familiar with the U-shaped valleys we see around here, and that also takes into account some ground penetrating radar that has been collected. The ground penetrating radar that's been collected has been run a few times. This system works really well in certain environments. It has a lot harder time in these wet snowpacks around the coast. And that is what, despite the fact that this has been completed several times, that's why there's still really limited information about the bathymetry of Mendenhall Glacier right outside of Suicide Basin. The next thing that it takes into account is how fast that volume of water is released under the glacier. And even just in the last few years, I think we've all seen that there has been some change in the rate of release, events that come more suddenly or come sooner. And again, we only have 3 years here to use as a physical basis for this, but there are other systems around here in Alaska, in our region, that have much longer periods of record for Glacier Lake outburst floods. That would include Lake No Lake and the Snow Glacier, which is up in south central Alaska. And what those systems both show is over time, there's a lot of variability, both in the peak discharge of events, but then also in the volume that's released. And there is not a strong relationship in those systems between the volume that is released, that's measured downstream, and the peak discharge. So what that tells you is that you can have a more peaked event for any discharge, and you won't necessarily have an event that has a higher peak discharge just because it has a higher volume released. So that variability is really what's being captured in these AEPs and also in those confidence intervals on the AEPs. And then, as we all know from last year, you can also have a rainfall event coincident with a GLOF event. So that's the other piece that's taken into account in the development of these design peak discharge events, is the possibility of having a coincident event where you have a large rainfall event or an atmospheric rainfall event coincident with a glacial lake outburst flood. I think our plan at this time was that we would take questions per slide. Does anyone have any questions while we're on this slide?
Mr. Sandiger.
Just for reference, what was, again, the cubic feet of the event last year?
The peak discharge that was measured in the Mendenhall River was right around 50,000 CFS. So if you were to break that up into a non-GLOF and a GLOF component, that's about, I think it's like 42,000 CFS was the GLOF component, and the non-GLOF was about 8,000 from that rainfall event. But the tables that you're seeing here, like I talked about, they're combined, they're the peak flow events for the entire river, not just for the GLOF.
Don't see any more questions on this page, so if you go ahead.
Great. Okay, so the development of those AEP events feeds right into the risk-based design that engineers use. And like I referenced on the last slide, although in any year, something like a 1% event, a 100-year event is unlikely to occur, over a series of years, it becomes much more likely that such an event will occur at least once. And so I think I'll start by drawing your attention to the figure on the left. So what you can see is that shows a 10% AEP event, so that's the equivalent of a 10-year event, and that shows the probability of exceeding a 10-year event as at least once as time passes. So after 1 year, as you'd expect, that's a 10% chance. But then after 10 years, it's over 60% chance that you will have seen an event of that magnitude. So what this all ties into is, as we look at short-term, medium-term, and long-term solutions, we have to think about the chance of exceedance of the design event. And so I'll start by using kind of a common design criteria for a long-term project. So that would be for a 50-year project, which is often designed for a 1% AEP event, a 100-year event. So if you look at the table on the right, that first column, what you can see circled in red at the bottom is if you were to design a project for 1% event in 50 years, there's almost a 40% chance of that event occurring at least once. And then if we look at a 2% event, you can see that it only takes 25 years to achieve that similar likelihood of exceedance. And then the third column here, the red circle is indeed supposed to be between 10 and 15 years because that would be right around 12 years that you would expect to have that same likelihood of exceedance, around 40%. So a way that I was trying to visualize or conceptualize how this works is I was first thinking about like flipping a coin. And, you flip a coin, there's a 50% chance of getting heads. But if you keep flipping that coin, you will get a tail eventually. And then imagine a 10-sided dice. That would be the equivalent of a 10% AEP event. You flip it once, there's a 10% chance of getting a select number. You keep flipping it, the odds that you will eventually get that go up. So that's kind of how I visualize that curve, where over time you are increasing your odds of experiencing that event at least once. And so for any flood risk management solution that engineers would design, we would take that into account. And that's why with the gabion baskets, it's important to look at a relatively rare event occurring, because there is the consequences of that occurring when that structure will be there, and the higher odds of that occurring when that structure will be there over a period of time. And with a lot of these structures, there actually can be an increased risk if that failure occurs and if that structure were not there, because you can then have water impounded behind the structure, whether it is a temporary gabion barrier, a sheet pile wall, or something else like that. Any questions on that?
Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What is what's the service life of the gabion basket system or a HESCO?
They have a warranty of 5 years for I think that's primarily for fabric degradation. Of course, those parts can be replaced, but that is kind of the maximum expectation without significant ongoing maintenance.
Ms. Wall.
I'm just going to throw this out there to make sure I'm understanding. I mean, I understand the theory here and make sure I'm using the table right. The estimate would be that the probability of a 90,000 CFS discharge event in the next 10 years would be 18%, because that's the 2% AEP at the 10 years. Is that
Correct.
just to think about? Okay, a massive event in the next 10 years, 18% chance.
Right.
Okay, thanks. With a lot of variability.
Yeah.
I had a question on this. I imagine flooding of other types is also very unique. But I was just wondering, just that outburst flooding is seemingly as I don't know, I guess, like how much confidence do you have in the model and the AEP? And anyway, just wondering how much,
Yeah, let's go back to slide 2, please. Yeah, so those confidence intervals are really meant to show the likely range where any of those AEPs would fall. And what I see when I look at those is they're big ranges for all the events, but the ranges are particularly on the high side. So for example, if you look at the 1% event, the low 95% confidence interval is 20,000 CFS lower, but the high side of that confidence interval is 50,000 CFS higher. There is also, like we talked about, I think that those confidence intervals do a pretty good job of summarizing the level of uncertainty in our estimates. these are things that will continue to get updated as we have more information. When we have the next GLOF, I will update these tables using another data point in our model. If we ever have high quality GPR that tells us more about the bathymetry in the main stem of the Mendenhall as the basin expands, I will update the model. But yeah, there's a fair amount of uncertainty. These are really meant to be a realistic estimate, not a conservative estimate. And then you can see the conservatism in the confidence interval.
Thank you for that. Ms. Wall and then Ms. Wall, Ms. Hughes Candies.
In terms of how the Corps typically uses this data, like, do you guys have, we're going to be asked some policy questions here where we, talk about our ability, how much we want to buy down risk, essentially, given this information. But do you guys have standards in terms of what risk you're willing to, accept when you're building a project or, working on something like this? Does that make sense?
You want to answer that, John?
Yeah, so that's a very difficult question for us, right? Given the situation that we have in the Mendenhall Valley. Usually those level of protection that type of design criteria usually comes through legislation. So that is, and what I'm referencing are existing core flood control projects that are authorized through Congress. In those authorizations, they describe the level of protection for the downstream communities of the. So right now, we don't have a. I guess I don't. We don't know. I don't know the answer to that question for this particular project.
Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make sure I tracked when you talked about in your response to Mr. Smith, the things that would cause it to get updated. You said if you had good GPR, I just want to make sure I'm tracking. What is that?
Yeah, sorry. That's ground penetrating radar. So that's either from a helicopter. Yeah, okay.
Appreciate it.
And I had one, do we have an estimate of how many years we expect outburst flooding from the suicide base?
I think that although there is a difference of opinion on the specific number of years, I think that everyone who's involved would say that it's a decadal timescale. So in the model that I developed, impactful GLOFs last about 25 years before there starts to be significant decrease in size of the GLOFs. Like I talked about before, particularly when it comes to the length of time that these events last. And, there's other peer-reviewed literature that describes a similar time horizon of about 30 years. But something that could happen that would dramatically change that time frame would be kind of like how there is currently a Mendenhall Lake. As the glacier continues to retreat, there might be a second Mendenhall Lake, which would then cause significant calving and would accelerate the rate of retreat of the Mendenhall Glacier. So something like that is an unknown that would dramatically change the duration of the impactful GLOF events from Suicide Basin.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions on this slide, go ahead to the next.
And good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for allowing the Corps of Engineers to speak here this evening. I do want to just kind of touch on the short term or the phase 2 work that the Corps is currently undertaking in partnership with the City and Borough of Juneau. Just in case everyone's not tracking, I'll just give a quick summary. Early February, the Corps of Engineers was able to issue a construction contract to Sea Alaska. We were able to conduct all our reviews and get mobilization out on site early March and began construction in mid-March timeframe. It took a little bit longer to get started because of weather conditions, some snow and ice on the ground, We did start over on Reach 5, which is the right bank of the upper portion of back loop, the downstream one, Brotherhood Bridge, I apologize. So we were able to kind of work out a lot of our construction methodologies, and now we have four full-time teams working in various reaches within the 6 reaches the Corps is currently undertaking. We have done work in all 6 reaches. We have been working a lot of the tides to ensure that we have a lot of the riprap done in a good quality manner. We are also working with engineering and design changes. So there's a lot of new information that recently came out in the early February, mid-February timeframe. So our teams are working very diligently, very quickly to adjust our flood protection levels so we can help meet that 63.5 KCFS threshold by mid-July timeframe. We also want to express our appreciation to all the businesses and property owners that we have been working in. We understand it is very disruptive to their individual day-to-day lives. The general feedback has been positive. Any challenges that we have encountered, we have been working as best we can with those property owners, business owners, to alleviate their concerns. So again, we don't jeopardize the entire project with our time schedule that we're undertaking. We are currently in a planning and scoping phase with the U.S. Forest Service because there is an area of concern north of Mendenhall Loop Road. So we're working with them to identify an appropriate alignment so we can build a levee/berm to help protect against some of these higher flows. So I do want to give thanks to the Forest Service as well because they've been great partners. We sprung this on them over the last 2.5 weeks, and they have jumped through a lot of hoops to kind of help make this happen for the Corps of Engineers. So we are currently working with our contractor to modify our existing contract so that can happen. The overall intent is to have all riprap and flood barriers in place by July 15th to include this new berm/levee up in the northern reaches of the river. Right now, we seem to be on track for that. So we are, again, very appreciative of all the support we've been getting from the city and borough and all the private citizens and business owners to help make that happen. Over the next few months, we are also going to be putting on another training event. We believe we had a successful training event last month, mid-April, focused on flood response techniques, the different flood fight materials that are available to the city and borough before, during, and after a flood event. The upcoming July training is going to be focused more on the general public, different sandbagging techniques, how they can protect their property in advance of the flood. So there still is a lot of work that the Corps is undertaking in the short-term method or the short-term timeframe. And we are working very, very closely with the city and borough staff to expedite all these challenges and all these requests that are coming through the Corps of Engineers. Pending any questions, I will just stop there. Yes, sir.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. You touched on that you had been communicating with a lot of the residents and business owners in the area. Could you describe what that communication, I guess what you've done in your communication outreach and what outreach you have planned in the future?
Yes, sir. So to start off the communication, the city and borough staff had essentially started the communication to all impacted property owners to let them know the Corps of Engineers and our contractor will likely be on their property in the near future. As we begin to get closer to that work, we have done our own outreach via email, knocking on doors, generally talking to the property owners before we impact their property. For the most part, that has went well. We had some challenges initially, just make sure we were all on the same page as far as correct points of contact, and then making sure everybody understood the project that was going to be undertaken on their specific property. Because depending on the property, it could have no armor, it could have, because there's already armor there already could be riprap that the Corps does place. in addition to the barriers. So trying to explain the impact that we are going to cause on their property. Throughout the construction, we do have quality assurance representatives from the Corps of Engineers who are our day-to-day eyes and ears, or the venting mechanism for a property owner to convey their concerns to us. And if there's an issue that we can address, we're going to address it. If we can't address it, then that's where we discuss it with our city and borough counterparts from the EPW office. Moving forward, we continue to follow that plan. If there's any refinements that we need to make, we're more than happy to discuss those, so then we can be more informative for any impacts to future residents that we're going to be going on their properties with. So.
Mr. Brooks and then just Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You'd mentioned that there was some information that you got recently that played into, having to change a little bit of the design. Was it always the intention to build for the 63,500 CFS event, or what was it beforehand if it wasn't?
So the intent when we first awarded our contract was to build to the flood of record. We had updated engineering data that was provided to the Corps of Engineers and the city and borough staff. So once we received that information, our engineers worked to identify where gaps in our protection were identified. And we identified a 63.5 kCFS threshold, which would be constructible prior to this year's flood, based on the Corps of Engineers contracting and construction process. So again, the intent originally was flood of record. Based on new data, we were able to adjust that to 63.5 thousand CFS.
Follow up, go ahead.
Thank you very much for that. My follow-up would be, when you were going through and doing your level of public outreach, was access granted under the premise of building to the record and then change somehow, and then you had to then communicate that to a person, and did that ever cause any issue as far as being allowed to continue on with doing the larger?
So, sir, by the time we were able to get on people's property, we had a pretty good idea of where these barriers were going to lie in the configuration. So we've had minimal issues with saying, hey, we're going to be putting a 1 barrier high on your property, and now we need to put 2 high. We have talked about different configurations because property owners have been very inquisitive on what's going on upstream, downstream. And some of them were like, if whatever you need, please go ahead and do what you need to on my property. And some needed a little bit more education on, hey, why would we need to go even higher than what you're doing right now? So I'd say it's on a per property basis on the types of questions that we're getting.
You might have touched on it briefly. I just wanted to check in though. The reason 63,500 CFS was selected. You mentioned ability, but anyway, I didn't know the other factors.
So I will have Mike Records start, and then I can jump in, sir.
Basically, the reasoning for that is, like I talked about in developing these AEPs, they take into account the size of the basin and the evolution of the basin. So that 62,000 CFS, 63,500 CFS is basically a forward projection of, at that time, what we thought was a likely event size for 2026.
And sir, based on that justification by Mr. Records and our other engineering staff, we were confident that we were able to adjust course on our configuration from our original contract.
Thank you. No other questions on that side. Go ahead.
So good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to be providing an update on our medium-term progress. So looking ahead to the 27 golf season. Our medium-term goal is to provide or develop a more robust and temporary risk reduction measure to, essentially reduce the risk of flooding along the Mendenhall River. We're evaluating for our medium-term measures, we're evaluating three different peak scenarios. That's the 63,500, 81,000 CFS and 90,000 CFS. So we're evaluating four general concepts. One is improving the existing gabion basket system. The other would be doing some in-river work where we would cut off or cut channels through several of the oxbows that are along the river to help increase the conveyance or move the water downstream faster. The third concept that we're looking at is a sheet pile wall system that would basically act as a flood wall similar to the gabion baskets. And that would be along the general same alignment as the gabion baskets. They're just a little bit more robust. They take into account some of the unknowns with the foundation that we're putting these flood barriers on. And then I guess ultimately our goal with the medium-term solutions would be to develop a combination of those measures and propose improvements to the system for the 2027 golf season. So I'll pause there for any questions.
One from Ms. Euskandis.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think that description helps me. The sheet pile wall system, I did have I'm still curious about that. So that would be leaving the baskets in place and then you're evaluating a reinforcement, or does that modeling contemplate swapping out?
Most likely scenario would be swapping out. So replacing the gabion basket system with a sheet pile wall system along that same alignment. There could be a scenario where it may be advantageous to put that wall just right in front of the existing gabion baskets, but there's some construction constraints with that in bringing in the cranes and the heavy equipment that's required to install a sheet pile wall.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Wall and then Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Chair Smith. I might be getting my short-term, medium-term, long-term things mixed up here, but long-term, I think of things that are going to stop the GLOF. Medium-term, are there medium-term things that have been evaluated for reducing the size of the GLOF, and were any of them feasible, if that makes sense? So I'm thinking people talked about displacing water by filling up the basin with something, or thinning the wall, the dam, or any of those things. Are those considered medium-term things, and have they been considered at any point in this?
So the answer to that is yes. We've evaluated, I guess, changes to the Suicide Basin, whether that's pumping or displacing water inside the basin with rock, or excavating the glacier, things like that, which would essentially lower the the pool elevation in Suicide Basin. All of those, we've basically just kind of come to dead ends on the practicality of doing it. Mainly because the glacier is moving. So anything that we would do to the glacier, it would be a yearly thing that you're constantly having to do it. And the challenges of getting heavy equipment up to where the work would have to be done, really the only practical way to get equipment up there is by helicopter. You're limited to their weight carrying capacity. The size of equipment that would be needed to do any excavation work on the glacier it just far exceeds the capacity to actually physically get equipment up there to work.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. Some of the items that you're considering for the 2027 medium-term solutions, such as creating oxbows or redirecting the flow of the river, is it possible that after having designed such measures that the HESCO barriers, like right now we're contemplating growing the size of the HESCO barriers to a point where they would need to be reinforced and more obtrusive on people's properties. Is there any possibility that some of these other measures would potentially reduce the needed height of the HESCO barriers?
So the modeling results that we've seen with making Mendenhall River channel adjustments, where we would excavate a channel to straighten out the river, it does lower the upstream water profile, upstream of where the channel would be excavated, but it increases it downstream. And those changes are, they're not very large. So in the channels that, I mean, you understand how big the Mendenhall River is. I mean, we would be essentially excavating a channel that same size through the oxbows. That is a lot of material to excavate, and it really is only effective in the zone where those channels are placed.
Thank you.
Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there any monitoring or information being collected on the status of the lake itself before the mouth of the river? Like each outburst, is there putting in a substantial amount of sediment to where it changes the flow dynamics on those outbursts, or is there anything there that's factoring into these calculations?
Yeah, so I guess there's a couple of pieces there. There's like maybe what you referenced first, which is like the actual sediment that's being deposited in Mendenhall Lake, which I don't think is significantly changing like the capacity of the lake. But then there's also the outlet of the lake. And I think as many of us have seen from going there in the winter, you can see that the outlet of the lake has evolved. And what we'd call that in hydrology is it's like the control for the lake. So yeah, what it appears is happening is at the same lake level, more water can now exit the lake at any particular lake level. And if you're if you walk the river, which I know you've all done, you can see that sediment has ended up in different sections of the river. So basically what's happening is, and we've seen this in cross sections of the Mendenhall River that we've hired surveyors to do. And that DOT has also done. So like, for example, at the Backloop Bridge, the bottom of the channel there is 6 feet deeper than it was a year ago from the scour of the channel during the events. But then there are other areas that now have more deposition. So you basically, there's kind of this like trade-off that happens that like certain areas will have higher capacity, and then other areas will have associated lower capacity. And what I will reference here is something I've referenced before, which is a previous publication by the USGS studying the Mendenhall River, and it talks about how the Mendenhall River is a hungry river and a young river. And basically what that means is all that sediment that's coming down out of the Mendenhall Glacier catchment is settling in the lake. So when the river leaves the lake, that river is hungry for sediment. And that's why you see those oversteepened banks along the Mendenhall River, is because the river wants to pick up sediment and scour down naturally as it flows.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Okay, now I'd like to provide an update on our technical study that we're conducting. So our overarching purpose of our technical study is to develop effective flood control measures for the Mendenhall Valley. This has evolved into analyzing the hydraulic loading conditions that Mike previously talked about. We're looking at the risks of the evolution of the Mendenhall River itself, consequences, and then costs to the different measures that we've evaluated. Our technical study is going to document the existing flood fighting activities up to this point. And it's going to identify short, medium, and long-term risk reduction measures. And that's going to include a suicide basin lake tap tunnel, a flood control dam, flood walls, be it a medium-term solution like the sheet pile wall system, or even a more robust flood wall like an eye wall or a composite wall that would require more land and would be higher and more further offset from the existing Mendenhall channel. We've evaluated a hybrid dam and flood wall alternative, and then included infrastructure relocation. So our next major milestone internally for the Army Corps of Engineers is we're going to be submitting a draft technical study to our headquarters for review, and that's scheduled for early August of 2026. I'll pause there for questions.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I was wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit more about that review, if it'll be open to the public to view, if it'll include various alternatives that have been considered, and the rationales for why one was selected or one was eliminated. Or
so our report is not going to make a recommendation or select an alternative. It's going to provide an array of measures at different peak flows that decision makers, at the headquarters level can then evaluate and make a recommendation to move forward with.
thank you.
Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is just kind of an add-on to Assemblymember Kelly's question, but is that draft technical study, can we expect it just to, cover those 5 bullet points above, or is it an array of things beyond that?
So it's going to include short-term, medium-term, and long-term measures. And I don't think that I answered your question about, is it going to be reviewed? So along the way we've been partnering with an engineering firm to develop this, and they've been producing reports that have been provided to CBJ to review and comment on. we're in the process of collecting review comments on a medium-term report right now. We've got a preliminary draft out that is being reviewed and commented on. So we're not, I guess we haven't settled on a risk reduction measure to the point where we're opening it up for a public comment period or a public review. This is a highly complex system that I guess we're just not at that stage yet. We will get there. At what point or what the timing of that is unknown right now.
Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You mentioned an engineering partner. Is it not the Army Corps in internal engineers doing it? And can you speak to who that engineering partner is?
Well, so AECOM is the engineering firm that's helping us. We're guiding them and partnering with them to develop these risk reduction measures. Yeah.
And I'll also just add that AECOM has hired Aaron Hood and Jason Amundsen from UAS to be part of their team for that. So we're really glad to have that local expertise as part of the AECOM team, and our goal of having an interagency effort that brings together all the subject matter experts on that.
Thank you. I don't see any more questions, and is this your last slide here?
Yeah, so I guess the next slide is just an opportunity to answer any other questions you may have about the Army Corps' work on this project.
Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I realized I didn't start my question where I usually do, which is just wanting to express immense gratitude for everything the Corps is doing for us. I wanted to wear my I love Army Corps t-shirt, but I forgot. We love that you guys show up. All the information you provided tonight was, just continuing to tighten our understanding of what's happening, which really helps our decision making. So thank you.
Well, we appreciate that. The CBJ engineering team is phenomenal. They've been an outstanding partner to work with, and very reasonable in the communication that's happening in between the Corps and CBJ. So it's a pleasure to be supporting this very important topic.
Ms. Hall.
I'll just echo Ms. Wall, immense gratitude for you guys being here and the partnership with our own team as well as our congressional delegation. And just very thankful, and we all sleep better at night as a result of that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, maybe we can just take a quick 5, but again, yes, thank you very much from staff, assembly, community. Let's take 5 and come back at 7:05. I'll bring us back at 7:11. Sorry for the delay there. Next up, we have our CBJ
Yes,
Engineering Public
Engineering
Works
Public
team.
Works is going to brief you on phase one.
Director Koch and team, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Go ahead when you're ready.
All right, thank you. I really want to send my sincere appreciations to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The Alaska District has been a true friend to Juneau, really. And I think it was important that they go first before us because they had to, frame up the hydrology and the hydraulics. And also, I think it was important to have that discussion about risk, both risk at an individual one particular year, but then also this concept that risk accumulates over time. And I think that that was important framing for you to hear this next piece where we get to policy decisions that the assembly is going to need to make. So we're just going to be talking about phase one, the HESCO barriers and the arm ring. So that's just kind of a subset of all the bigger GLOF pieces. Next slide, please. So Mr. Steininger, maybe I was reading your mind. I just think there are so many numbers associated with GLOF, and then our colleagues at the Army Corps threw even more numbers at you. And sometimes it's just good to kind of ground with their numbers. They were talking about kind of predictions for the future. And sometimes it's just good to talk about the data points that we know for certain from the recent past. And then, just once again, the GOFs in the last few years, they've gotten bigger. They've been, much more concerning. We saw especially that jump from 2023 to 2024. There were definitely homes that were damaged in 2023, and any home that's damaged is really devastating for that homeowner. There is also a huge, sort of an exponential, or an order of magnitude, I should say, change in the number of residences that were damaged between 2023 and 2024. And then, of course, importantly, just to frame this discussion about phase one and what we want to do with phase one in advance of the 2026 GLOF is that despite the fact that we had we had a higher discharge in 2025, we had much less impact to homes. And that was because of the HESCO barriers, phase one HESCO barriers. They weren't perfect. We realized that. We know that there was seepage in some areas. We're planning for the 2026 GLOF to have pumps in place and all of those sorts of things. But just to kind of frame this phase one discussion, those HESCO barriers were effective in the 2025 GLOF. Next slide, please. So before I start talking about this particular SRF funding, I wanted to always pause. We have so many strong partners in this really terrible GLOF situation that we find ourselves in. First and foremost, the congressional delegation. I mean, every member of Alaska's congressional delegation is carrying a different piece of the GLOF kind of moving us forward on finding GLOF solutions. We have, of course, Senator Sullivan, who's on the Armed Services Committee and is particularly influential in getting the Army Corps to spend as much time as they are spending in our community. And we really thank Senator Sullivan and the Army Corps for that. Of course, also Senator Murkowski has been instrumental She, for example, this year is carrying a congressionally directed spending, trying to move that forward for us for $8 million for both geotech and some planning for an enduring solution. And then Congressman Begich also is trying to get, I think that's $3.2 million in CDSs for HESCO barrier maintenance. So many thanks to all of them. Also, we always have our strong partnership with Clinton and Haida in terms of moving forward together on EOCs. And then also the Clinton and Haida Regional Housing Authority. Last year, we received as a subrecipient to them $1 million that we were able to use for HESCO barrier armoring. And we are working through them to try to get another award this year for $1.2 million. So we've had many, many partners. I do want to focus, the reason I'm focusing this slide on the state, so the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation, that they have also been in some ways they've been pretty low key, but they have been a big friend to our community. This SRF is state revolving funds. This is a loan/grant hybrid is the way that I like to think about it, because the program is 50% forgivable. So that's sort of the grant part and 50% not. That's the loan part, and the loan comes at a very good interest rate. So they are bringing potentially a lot of money to the table. And also that some of those funds are really pretty close to being imminent. So we've had 2 stages of applying for this SRF funding. So the first SRF loan is at $6.8 million that was approved in May of 2025. And that was really just to get us through getting phase 1 in place for the 2025 GLOF. And we have already requested a reimbursement, and we think a reimbursement is imminent. And by imminent, I mean, weeks to a month max sort of time frame. And for a pretty significant amount of money, probably over $3 million. So that was the first SRF that we had in the works. Then we also, there's a process where you could apply for SRF funds. So we went through a second application process to get on the list for $18 million because we knew that we were going to be flood fighting for multiple years. We didn't know how expensive it would be. Like many things in the GLOF, we're just kind of moving forward with incomplete knowledge, but we knew it would be more expensive. So we applied, we started this application process. You will see that resolution in support of that loan on the May 18th Assembly agenda. So that one is making its way through. Next slide, please. So for our 2026 phase 1 project status, we are, working to, I just want to reinforce for folks who might be listening at home, phase 1 is the responsibility of CBJ, whereas phase 2, we are so grateful to the Army Corps for doing HESCO work, and their work is on phase 2. So that's why we have kind of this dual work that's happening this season, where CBJ's contractors are working on phase 1 and USACE's contractors are working on phase 2. So some of that work for phase 1 includes armoring of the riverbank. That kind of goes back to our colleague, Mr. Records, kind of talking about that hungry river that always wants to scour out the banks. Right now, we have 4 contractors under contract who are working on portions of phase 1 for us. We are almost about a month late in terms of when we started versus last year because of our snowpocalypse. But we had to get our contractors kind of working as soon as we could. And we'll have, and some of those contractors are working on both riverbank armoring as well as HESCO barriers. Next slide, please. So this slide looks kind of small on the screen, so hopefully it's a little bit bigger in your packet. My objective for putting together this table was to provide some big picture context. So at the top, it talks about the first line is what phase one cost for 2025. Then there's that's the 7.8 million. Then there's a break there. And then the rows below that are the 2026 costs. So the first, and we also give you some sense of the barrier length. You could see, for example, that the second substantive row talks about phase two. You can see that's longer than phase one at the 3.6 miles. As they mentioned in the previous presentation, they are protecting to the 63,500 CFS. They have a rough order of magnitude, sort of 26 million cost. And then the next, the blue rows are really the rows that where we're trying to kind of hone for the assembly to ultimately wind up weighing in and providing guidance on what you want, what level of risk you want to buy down via CBJ for phase one. So we presented those three different options. So option one is I kind of think of that as status quo plus. The reason I call it status quo plus is it would protect to a level that's pretty similar to the level of protection that we had for the 2025 GLOF, with the exception of our contractors have already done some higher installation of HESCOs around Diamond Park. They started there because it was easiest to get to. We had lots of snow. It was CBJ land. It was easier to clear the snow there, meaning it's not because that's the highest risk area. It was just in terms of constructability with a snowpocalypse, it was easiest to get to. And then the other piece is that we would reinforce some areas like Marion, around Killowitch, around Riverside Drive, where last year we saw, water kind of lapping over the top of the HESCO, some minor overtapping. We would just do some work there, and then we would button it up. Then for option two versus option three, those are the same level of barrier lengths, but they are protecting to different levels of a severity for a GLOF. So either for the option two, we've got the 63,500 CFS versus option three is the 90,000 CFS event. And in a moment, I will pass the metaphorical baton over to Deputy Director Rumsey, where he will go into some of the differences between what are the cost drivers between options two and options three. But I think another thing that's important for the group to know is if when you look at the cost of option two versus option three, that is the cost for doing that work pre-2026 GLOF, because that delta that you could see all the way to the right, where we say, oh, we would need $8 million more dollars to protect to 90,000 versus we need $3 million additional dollars to protect to 63,500. I just want to make it clear that that would be for this year, that $5 million, if there was a decision that was made where the will of the body said we want to protect to 63,500, and in the future we needed to go back. Maybe we have a much bigger GLOF this year, or for various reasons, if we went back in an iterative fashion to build then from 63.5 to 90,000 CFS, it would be more than $5 million because you have to remobilize all of the contractors and those sorts of things. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. And then just wanted to mention that this is always acknowledging that this is a really, really difficult situation for the community, especially people who live in the inundation area. And we're similar to last year, we're always having to make decisions quickly with incomplete information. It always feels uncomfortable. And to some extent, I think that this is a risk tolerance and financial question. And keep in mind, when you look at that very last column, when we say we need $3 million more for alternative 2 and $8 million for alternative 3, that does not include this $18 million SRF because it's not in hand. You haven't taken action on it yet. You will have that before you on May 18th. But that excludes that $18 million because we didn't want to kind of count our chickens before they're hatched, if you will. You haven't taken an action on it, and therefore we don't count that as money that we have in hand. But keep that in mind. You've got that 18 million SRF. With that, I will hand it to Deputy Director Rumsey.
Director Koch, maybe just pause for a moment for questions. I'm seeing some.
Thanks,
Mrs. Candies.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to make sure I'm understanding I understand why you didn't include it. We haven't taken action on it. Let's say we took action on it yesterday. Now we haven't been, we thumbs up the resolution for an 18 million SRF. Then these numbers on the additional funds would change.
So through the chair to Ms. Hughes Scandies, in terms of that SRF process, first, and we need to have a resolution. That's the last piece that we need for the application to DEC. Then there also needs to be an appropriating ordinance. So there are still a few kind of procedural pieces that would need to fall into place in order for CBJ to be able to access that 18 million. But you were right. Let's just assume for the thought exercise, the Assembly approved that resolution and those appropriating ordinances, then those funds would be available and we wouldn't be in the red.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mr. Brooks and Mr. Sandinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the SRF loan, do you know what the interest rate would be on the other 50%?
Oh, goodness. I might do a phone a friend. I know it's I think even better than our rate for Central Treasury loan. It is a very, very advantageous rate, but I cannot remember exactly what that rate was.
I believe it's around 2%. So it's somewhere in that 2 to 2.5, but I think it's closer to 2 or 2.1. But we can look it up and get back to you with that.
That's good. Thank you.
Mr. Sandinger, then Mr. Kelly.
Excuse me. Looking ahead, I think this might actually get addressed at a later slide. But I know some of the homeowners have received communication about, oh, you should anticipate X number of additional HESCOs on your wall. Those notices, are those based on the 90,000 or the 63,000?
Through the chair to Mr. Steininger, those notifications were based on the 90,000 CFS.
Mr. Kelly and then Mayor.
Thank you. So is my understanding the loans are 50% forgivable? Is it the usual practice of the state to go to that full 50%, or could we receive less than that 50% in loan forgiveness?
Through the chair to Mr. Kelly, we are expecting to receive the full 50% in terms of that loan. It's officially a loan forgiveness.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you, and thank you, three of you, to be here tonight on a beautiful night. I know we've started working on the HESCO bears because I live in the valley and drive by them all the time. Have we built any of them already to the 90,000 CFS?
Through the chair to Mayor Weldon, yes, in that one location I was mentioning around Diamond Park where we started first just because of ease, and we had to get our contractors going. We were at some point worried that we were going to start to lose labor.
I had one, and I might be, anyway, you said the repayment or the forgiveness is imminent for the first loan we did. When we receive that, does that actually, would that actually increase our GLOF CIP, or does it just reduce the amount? Anyway, just trying to think about balances and things.
So, and I might also look to Madam Manager to make sure that I have this correct. But when I say the one piece that we are confident in that first SRF that we applied for, that we're going to get imminently, and by that we mean probably the next few weeks, it will probably be more than $3 million. That comes back, that's in some ways like revenue back to CBJ, and then kind of what happens on the back end, sort of finance wise, and where that winds up in a CIP, we have finance help us with in the background.
Madam Mayor?
You just started talking about it between you and the Army Corps and the summer stuff. Are we doing okay with contractors, or are we running short?
Through the chair to Madam Mayor, we are doing okay, but I think that we are using a lot of our available contractual labor in town. For phase one, CBJ is using all local labor.
Madam Manager, did you have, or try to say it again about the loan repayment or the loan forgiveness, this $3 million? Does it increase any of our CIPs, or does it just mean we had, help me with this?
It does not increase our CIPs. It is just a cash payment from DEC. So we have accounted for that in our CIP balance. And I just will, it's been a long time unraveling, how much we have and where it came from and what's forgivable and what's forgiven, because so it's very confusing. So please do not feel, if you're confused, it's because we've spent a lot of time with finance, because there's been so many different pieces to this. But that's how we got to the 11.8 million in available funding, right? Was all these different appropriations, including the appropriation for the original LID, which, if you recall, when you made that appropriation, we did not know we had that DEC forgivable loan. So we have kind of that funding that to help get to this cumulative 11.8 million in available funds.
Thank you. Ms. Wall, and then Ms. Hall.
I'm going to keep following on this money train here because it's confusing, but thank you for trying to clarify. So if we think about the additional funds needed listed here, we would again have to appropriate those funds from current city resources and then wait to get the loan and then only pay half of it back, or pay, yeah, that's how it would work. We would still have to appropriate funding from restricted budget reserve or somewhere to make this project happen this year, or would we get the loan and that is the money that we would use?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So if you choose option 2, which is the build with 63,500 CFS, which is the recommendation in your memo, you are short $3 million. We have a parallel, we have an ordinance drafted, if you make that recommendation tonight, that would appropriate funds to do just that. We also, of course, have the resolution on May 18th applying for the SRF. If we are able to get that loan in hand, we will use the funds provided by DEC to fund that project, and no new appropriation would be needed. If we're not able to get those funds in hand, like in pocket, right, to be able to spend them, then we would need an authorizing funding source. We basically need to shift some money around, right? Be like, we need an ordinance for $3 million that we will then pay back. We're trying to avoid that because the funding streams have been so confusing on this project. So it's a long way of saying, we are hoping to not have to come back to you and say, can you spot me $3 million until this loan comes through? But we are also trying to prepare for that, and it may need a special meeting to make that happen.
Follow up.
Quick follow-up, that was helpful. And then do we have to specify how we're paying the loan back? Like normally we wouldn't be able to take out a loan without knowing how we're paying it back. And if this is only 50%, I'm just wondering where that money comes from. If we're just hoping I'm assuming we can't just hope future assemblies pay for it.
We do have the funds appropriated because you have appropriated that match.
I meant for the 3.
Yep, so we would have an appropriating ordinance that we would introduce on May 18th that would appropriate those funds because we cannot spend those funds without assembly approval. One way to think of it, and Finance Director Flick is online when it exceeds my capabilities here, but one way to think of it is if this were just a utility loan, like not a big emergency, we would apply, we would borrow the money, and then we would get the money, and then over time, we would, over 20 years, we would repay that loan through utility rates, right? But in this case, we're ring fencing general fund through a CIP for repayment of that loan. Now, the loan does live in the operating budget, which is where it exceeds my capability to explain it to you. But what matters to me is that we actually have those dollars to pay back, and we're not putting that burden on a future assembly. So if you're not, if that isn't enough for you, I do think that Director Flick could be pulled over to help explain that. I see confusion.
I'm confused, but if I'm the only one, okay, looks like I'm not the only one.
Maybe we can have Director Flick give it a shot.
Good
Director
evening.
Flick.
You guys hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Excellent. Through the chair to Ms. Wall, I guess, could I get clarification on your question? Is it about the appropriation of the loan for the CIP, or is it on the repayment of the loan in the future?
Both. I think if we make the decision, I mean, not a decision, but if we set the direction tonight for spending the additional funds needed to make, let's say, option 2 happen, that it sounds like where is the money coming from that we will need to spend to make that whole? So half of it will come from a loan, a forgiven loan, but half of it we will have to pay. And my understanding is if we don't have those funds, then it's not sitting in our budget somewhere.
Thank you for that clarification. So with respect to the project funding, we have the 11.8 million that's reflected on the screen available. If you move forward with option 2 or option 3, we will need additional appropriation, and that's where that DEC loan comes into play. And the question that we'll be working with Director Koch and her engineering crew to understand is how quickly are we spending down that 11.8 million? And in conjunction with DEC, can we work through the DEC loan process fast enough? And we suspect that we can, that we could have the loan approval in hand to have the assembly take appropriating action by June 8th, which will fund from a CIP perspective all of the work that needs to get done that's presented for you here today. When it does come time to repay the loan, we will need to work towards that long-term funding solution, which I believe is Manager Kester's second memo for later on in discussion this evening.
I had Miss Hall. I guess, while we're still on this topic, did anyone need further clarification kind of on this flow of funds? Okay, Miss Hall, question for you.
Thank you,
Then
Chair
Missy
Smith.
Scandies. Yep.
Yeah, and this would be for Director Koch. When you were discussing option 3, you did touch on significant savings doing it at the same time or doing that versus building to 63.5 and then, in the future, if you were to come back and ask for this, it would be a lot more expensive because you'd have to remobilize. And can you speak to a little bit, the decision made to go with or recommend option 2 versus 3?
Through the chair to Ms. Hall, I'll speak to just the difference in the cost between those two options, but I know that the manager was going to speak to her recommendation, so I don't want to get out ahead. But I do want to confirm that the point I just wanted the group to know is that difference in essentially our shortfall, our $3 million for alternative 2 and that $8 million for alternative 3, that is the difference for construction in this construction season, and that we anticipate, and it's in Manager Kester's memo, that if we came back in a future year, whether that's 27 or 28, because we continue to learn more, and the will of the community is to build to 90,000 CFS. Maybe people are thinking about this 26% chance that we'll have 90,000 CFS in the next 15 years. It would be more than $5 million to get from the 63,500 to the 90,000. It would probably be more like 10 million to remobilize everybody again and to rebuild. So it would be incremental building is just more expensive than building it that way once.
Missy Scandies. Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is back to the funding flowage because a horse is moving. I'm going to ask a follow-up question to Ms. Wall's question to make sure that I understand it. I think I'm following all of the movement of money and the speed of when we think we could have that, and that would take, if we get that in hand, that takes care of it. If not, we have to fill in this 3 million to get this done this year. The utility example really helped me because that payback, once a assembly appropriates or accepts that loan /grant, future assemblies don't see it again because the utility pays back that 50%. So in this case, is it right to say that 9 million that will need to be paid back, future assemblies will see that in the CIP, or will they see that in the operating budget? Because that's where it lives. So future assemblies will appropriate $9 million. Is that accurate? I asked 3 ways.
Yeah,
I know. That's the problem with thinking out loud.
No, because we will have the 50% forgiveness to pay it back. So we're essentially, I'm so sorry. I'm trying to think of a good way to explain this because it's very complicated. If you think of it like a grant, they're paying for half the project, but you're appropriating all the funds for the project. So you've already appropriated the general fund share, and you can ring fence that other 50%. You can use that 50% forgiveness to then pay back the loan over time, or however you like, or however you choose to pay that back, because you've appropriated the funding for the whole project. You're not. As long as you're appropriating enough funding in this CIP, right, and we're asking you to appropriate the full funding for the project, then you will have that future funding ring fence to pay for those payments, right? I mean, it only costs, the loan piece makes it really confusing, but again, if it were a grant and you appropriated $20 million, or let's say if it were a grant and you had to appropriate $20 million and 10 million was coming from the state and 10 million was coming from fund balance, that would be the entirety of your cost. So when you think about 14.8 million and 7.4 is coming from fund balance and 7.4 is coming from the state, the mechanism through which to pay that back is confusing, but you don't need new money. Does that make sense?
Let me try.
The mayor has gonna give it a shot.
Let me try to explain this differently. So we've appropriated the money, and on those appropriation, we had where we were getting the money from. So we have already accounted for all of our appropriations with money. Correct?
Correct.
Okay, that's good enough for me.
Go ahead, Ms. Wall.
But you're talking about the 11.8 million, right? We have not appropriated the 3 million, the additional 3 million or the 8 million. And so are you saying we would need to appropriate that now from our money so that it can get paid back?
Chair, can I request an Eddie's?
Let's have a brief Eddie's. All right, bring us back to order as we're doing fun math. Madam Manager, did you want to try, or are people feeling good on their understanding, or
So
okay.
go ahead.
Here is my understanding of it, and I hope this doesn't make it worse. Should we proceed with option 2, we would, I'm going to do it I'm going to try to do it in like functional things versus like all this, oh, the appropriating ordinance will say this and that and whatever. So if we go for option 2 and then we say we want to pursue this DEC 50% loan, there is a chance that the loan would come through more quickly, and the functional difference there would be the 11.8 million it would reduce by 7.4 million because we would have to we were setting aside that amount to pay for half the loan. If it doesn't happen as quickly or as good as we would like, we have to appropriate the 11.8 and then find a temporary, I don't know if it's restricted budget reserve, a CIP for the 3 million, and knowing that it would that it would come back to us quickly, and that would just be a temporary Band-Aid. But regardless, should we go with something like option 2, the functional change would be reducing the 11.8 million CIP by 7.4 million, half of the project cost. Is that?
You and I share the same understanding. Thank you for articulating it.
That's just how it's helping me from like a functional standpoint. I'm sure the mechanisms are complicated and they'll have to explain it to us again or something. But does that give us enough to maybe like at least continue on with and allow our public works team to keep going? And maybe as we look at an option and we need more clarity, we will strive to find it before we have to make a decision. But okay. Director Koch and crew, continue on with. Oh, excuse me. I did have a couple other questions in the queue. I had Mr. Brooks and Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This was about the mayor's question earlier, whether any work has been done for the 90,000 CFS protections, and there was work done. If we're just now trying to figure out a direction on what kind of protection we want, how has that work already been done, and how much has been spent on that kind of work?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Brooks, we are currently about just over $5 million in expenses right now, and we have been working on access and fortifying to 90,000 CFS as we've been working. As Director Koch had said, we were working at Diamond Park, as well as at Killowitch and Melvin Park and Riverside, which are areas for relatively high sunlight, easy access, and low impact to property owners while we're working with the property owners. And so those are areas that have been raised already and are in process of being repaired as well. And we're trying to pick off the higher risk areas at the same time, but we're also trying to go to work so that we're not lagging behind, because we started a month late, plus we're still dealing with frozen ground. So those pieces of the puzzle are still in the back of our head. And so, if we have to shift to 63.5, that's totally doable. And just, we wouldn't go backwards to undo the work, but I just want, it's a good question you asked. We do have a bunch of areas that we are working towards 90,000 at this point.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much for that. Maybe just, breaking down the process that got to that point a little more. So going into it, the original was for the to match the same level. That was the original intent. Then more information came in saying that we might need to work for the 63,500, but a bunch of work is being done for the 90,000. So I'm just wondering how that progression got of, we went in with this intent to do what the match was for the previous year, but now we need a little more, but now we're going to go for the big barrier.
Through the chair to Mr. Brooks, we might tag team this one. You're correct, because initially we had that flood of record was the initial understanding. Once again, we get our HESCO barriers from the Army Corps free of charge, and we very much appreciate that. So initially we were, that was our operating assumption. Then once we were no longer held to just that flood of record, which I think would have been unwise, since every year we've had a bigger GLOF. Then we got into the question of, well, how much bigger do we go? Do we go to 63.5? Do we go to 90,000? Part of that kind of gets into the unknowns, and there are lots of different pieces that are moving, but also knowing that the enduring solution is not necessarily on an expedited time frame. That time frame might be longer, is part of what went into our thinking of, well, I wonder, we don't know exactly how long it will be before we have an enduring solution. Is it wisest for us to think about 63.5? Is it wisest for us to think about 90,000 CFS? We had to, as Mr. Bohan said, we had to get our contractors working. We also have this like tick in the back of our head because we're racing against the clock. But we did want to come back to this body and get some weigh in on that's there at some level. That is very much a policy call.
Madam Manager.
Thank you. If I could add, just because Assemblymember Brooks asked this very same question that I had, and Denise had, Director Koch had to peel me off the ceiling. And I think what you're getting at, not to be too bold, is how is it that we already started work on a project that you need additional authority and permission from the Assembly to spend a whole bunch more money? That was the question. I'll just say that because that was the question that I certainly had. And so what happened is when we started this project, we had over $5 million in authority for maintenance of HESCO barriers based on the appropriation that you made from the Capital Civic Center CIP. And staff was, working underneath that authority. And I was like, $5.5 million, that's a lot of money. We need to update the Assembly. And as staff got into this project and started really digging, they realized they had to undo large chunks of the HESCO barriers. So instead of just going in and fortifying them or adding a couple barriers, it actually meant rebuilding entire sections of wall. It meant twice as many barriers as in phase one. And those things they didn't know until they had crews out there working. So that's when engineering came to me and said, we actually think this project that we originally thought was going to be about $5 million is actually a $20 million project. And I'm like, well, let's find another solution then. And the solution is the 63.5 that we've come up with today. But it's a absolutely legitimate question. We were operating under project authority. And once we got in there, realized to do the project as we originally envisioned, that the project that I emailed every riverfront property owner and said we were building to 90,000 is just not feasible with available funding. And in fact, to do something that we think is the responsible thing to do, 63.5, we have to go back to the Assembly for additional authority. So I just want you to I want to walk through that with you because it took me about a week and a lot of emotion to work through all of that. And here we're asking you to do that, at the dais. So I hope that my summary helps with your understanding of how we got to this meeting today.
Mr. Brooks, follow up.
Thank you very much for the explanation on both of that. And it's more so I just want to make sure that we have all the resources available that we need and are making the best use for them. So if we have those areas that are built out to 90,000, it's not just tall, it's tall and wide, and then all the rock that needs to go underneath to support that as well. And if we end up deciding, hey, we need something a little less, then what's involved there? Do we just leave the larger stuff, or do we disperse it back into areas? And and then what do we what do we factor as far as, you know, the investment made in that if it's not the overall thing that we end up with, you know, do we just call that labor and material a loss essentially?
So I think knowing that this GLOF season will bring us more information, at this moment in time, there is not a scenario where we believe you will not in the future have to build a 90,000 CFS. I also think that's a project that we cannot afford at this moment in time.
Yeah, Mr. Kelly, but did you have something on this amendment?
Just to follow up, Mr. Brooks, so I'm assuming we will leave the section we built up to 90 CFF. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Kelly?
Thank you. So regardless of what we approve today, we started one project, the 90,000, which has a different budget than the, so I guess my question is, when we are presented with this additional 3 million, does that include the money that we've already spent building towards item number 3, or is it possible that we might have more expenses because we started on the larger project that we might not be moving towards?
Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Kelly, we're hoping that that will cover everything. As with the unknowns we have in this project that we're unearthing as we're still uncovering things, there are still a lot of things we're not sure of. And that's why, as Deputy Director Rumsey will go through, we have high contingencies on some of our numbers. So we're hoping that we will be able to cover this, but we still have unknowns that we're not 100% positive of. So.
Thank you.
I don't have any more questions, so I think proceed ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The goal of my slides is to provide some additional context and detail to the manager's Phase 1 guidance for 2026 memo. Luckily, many of the questions you've asked so far have addressed some of those slides. But I think I'll take a quick editorial. I think we're at a point now. Last year, some of the decisions that we had to make from an engineering standpoint were relatively straightforward because we didn't have, when we first started out our efforts, things like robust hydrologic and hydraulic modeling. We had high water marks, and we knew that we could, with the Army Corps' help, provide a barrier system that would protect the flood of record. It made things pretty straightforward for us. Now that we've gotten into much more substantial hydrologic and hydraulic modeling, it has also made it more challenging for us to collect the data that we need in time to make timely project decisions. And so in this particular case, we've been working on a 90,000 cubic foot per second model for some time. Through our consultation with the Army Corps of Engineers, that's been refined even within the last 2 weeks. And so we're trying to make sure that with all of the factors that have to be considered for such an important project to the community, that we balance things out, like how much is this going to cost? Do we have the contractor capacity to carry this work out? What will future work look like in terms of impact to the homeowners that are hosting these barriers? So I really hope to provide some additional context with these slides. As Mr. Bohan had mentioned, even with the status quo work, the work that we've first started carrying out and the work that we would otherwise need to do just to get us back to essentially the level of protection that we had for a 2025 GLOF and address all of the maintenance needs and armoring needs that we've identified. It's a more complicated project this year. The winter lasted longer than we anticipated. We got off to about a month later start than we were hoping to be able to. And that has then resulted in things like using equipment to thaw HESCO barriers out so that we could identify what maintenance might need to be done and also to be more effective in removing barriers so that we could get access. We've encountered frozen ground, which either then needs to be We got to do snow removal, which is not something that we anticipated when we first carried this out, or it makes excavation more challenging for us to perform. So in addition to that, and I'll go into a little bit more detail in later slides, but there have been a few areas that have been much more challenging for us to perform stabilization work than we anticipated, and we would not have been able to identify that until we, for example, removed barriers, did some investigation, and then realized how much work that was going to entail. There was not a practical way for us to do that prior to when our contractors were on site. As it relates to the alternative 2 and alternative 3 for higher levels of protection, as you can see, I've highlighted the top cell. It didn't come in as clear as I was hoping. But the primary drivers for increased costs are really due to the total number of additional linear feet that we would need to install to achieve the desired height. And Mr. Brooks, to your point, the depth, the entire configuration. Last year, we installed, I think it was about 19,000 total, or was it 20? Yeah, that's right. About 28,000 total linear feet. Getting to 63.5 would essentially double that effort, but it's more complicated because we're building to higher heights, which means you have to factor in things like additional fall protection, more complex maneuvering for equipment and laborers. In addition, as Mr. Bohan had mentioned, if you look down near the bottom of the table up there, we have identified contingency factors both for the HESCO barrier portion and for the armoring. As I mentioned, there have been some areas of armoring that we were not obviously damaged after a 2025 GLOF, but as we've gotten back to do more investigation with lower waters in the wintertime, we've identified those. Next slide, please. Oh, I did want to, sorry, Madam Clerk, could you go back one? I did want to note, Director Koch mentioned this, but if we were to raise the barriers to 63.5 this year and then look to seek higher levels of protection in the future, it is a complicating factor in performing the work, and we would anticipate higher costs associated with incremental efforts to achieve a ultimately higher level of protection. Thank you. So there's a couple of slides that I've got here, and I apologize because these aren't coming through clear in color on the screen, but it's really to highlight the constructability challenges regardless of what path we move forward. So quickly, I'll highlight in blue is the existing conditions after HESCO Phase 1 last year. In red is the 63.5 thousand cubic feet per second barrier and the heights and configuration associated with that. And then in black is the height of the barrier should we build to 90,000 CFS. There's also a section highlighted in yellow which shows work where we have been able to get out on site and at least start performing that work. This is the Riverside Kilowitch area. And the reason I wanted to point this section out to you as a representation of the challenge of this work is if you look at the areas in red, which would indicate how high we need barriers for a 63,500 CFS event, and then the black, there is substantially more section of barrier wall that we would have to install at that higher level for the 90,000 to protect against the 90,000 CFS event as opposed to the 63.5. So this is just a good example of the extent to which those incremental increases, it's a lot of barriers and a lot of barriers needing to be installed with lots of equipment and lots of labor and lots of effort. Next slide, please.
Mr. Rumsey, a question from the mayor.
At what height would that, the land across from the populated spot flood? So that point sticking out there.
Thank you for the question, Mayor. I don't off the top of my head know exactly what height that would be, but that area has flooded at least in the 24 and 25 floods, and I believe it flooded in the 23 flood as well. And if anyone is aware of. Okay, okay. Oh, that's true. That's a good point. The www.junoflood.org website could very easily help us get to that answer, which shows flood inundation extends from 8 feet all the way up to 20 feet. So we can get an answer to that.
Okay, go ahead.
Next slide, please. So this slide shows the southern section of Meander Way for our phase 1 project. And it's another clear example of where, regardless of what work we perform, if we raise the levels, significant access must be established to do whether it's repair activities, reinforcement activities, or raising activities. It's also an example of the significant challenge of incrementally increasing height. There is about an 800 to 900 foot stretch of barrier that's currently at 1 high here. And for a 63.5 thousand CFS level of protection, we would raise that area to 2 high. But for a 90,000 CFS event, we would need to raise that section to 3 high. So when reflecting back on the cost estimate detail that was shown before on one of the slides, you can just see each one of those years not only incurs additional considerable cost, but it would also have a significant impact on those homeowners that have to have equipment and labor in their backyard for longer periods of time to perform those activities, as opposed to potentially coming back annually and focusing on just repair activities.
Mr. Ramsey, a question from
Yep.
Mr. Steininger.
In some of these areas, as you go higher, you have to go wider as well.
Yes.
I assume, are we starting to run into places where some of these homes are like physically in the footprint of where you would have to widen the barriers? And, how are we handling that situation if it is happening?
Through the chair. Thank you, Mr. Steininger. Yes, we are going to have some challenges. And again, fortunately, we've had some warmer weather, so we're finally starting to look at those areas and work on the configurations. And there's some different ways we can ballast barriers to get to added heights and creatively work with what we call buttress cells and larger, narrow cells where they need to be confined to avoid a home construction type scenario, but then balancing the mass on either side of the home to be able to counterweight the narrower section, but higher section. So there are opportunities there, and we're weighing every single one to try to minimize the impacts on the homes as much as possible.
Mr. Kelly.
So just to follow up, we're not in a position where we think we would have to remove or destroy any homes. We're talking about there might be creative solutions for how we can situate the HESCO barriers if we at a later date go to the 90,000 foot scenario.
Yes, there would be no home removal at this time. There might be some steps or a minor deck, depending on the configuration. But no, there's no issues with homes at this point.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Next slide, please. So making a decision about the level of protection we should aim for is challenging, and I wanted to list out a few things here that we've been looking at from a technical and practical perspective. Specifically, I'd like to point out a few things that have made this especially challenging for this year as we transition from trying to address the immediate need. What are we going to do before this go off? To how can we best provide protection for the community for the foreseeable future. And it has been challenging. So first, I want to point out that and I mentioned this before, but the H&H modeling is a constant effort because of the morphological changes that the Army Corps had mentioned before, where sediment lands, to keep up and make sure that the models that we're using are reflective of the conditions in the river. Oftentimes, that's a lengthy process, and we're going out and getting surveys and bathymetric data and everything else to plug into that model so that we can try to make the best decisions we can. But it is a lengthy process, and we want to make sure that we're using the most up-to-date available data to make those decisions. Secondly, there's uncertainty regarding how long we may have to rely on the barriers. And so when we think about what do we need to do for this year, that's really important. But we should also, as we can, throughout the life cycle of having to do this type of flood fighting, take the time to think about how can we do the best thing in the long run, and what does that look like? And then lastly, as I mentioned, the constructability challenges, potential costs, and the impact on homeowners is something that we have really tried to take into consideration as we're making recommendations for the level of flood protection. There was a question before about constructability from a resources standpoint. I do want to make it clear that we do believe we could, with the amount of equipment and laborers that we have, construct phase 1 to 90,000 CFS for this season, but we recognize that due to other constraints, that may not be a realistic approach for us. Next slide, please.
And a question from Ms. Hall.
And would that other constraint be funding?
Thank you for the question. Yes.
Mr. Bohan.
Just to add on to that, one other piece of the puzzle we have is a lot of these areas, especially that map of Meander Way that Mr. Rumsey had just shown you. We're likely, if we go back in there to raise, going to have to remove what we just did to get back in there to rebuild to, from 2 high to 3 high. And so there are multiple areas that those are factors when we were thinking about constructability and whether to build to 63.5 or 90,000. We were trying to, reduce construction fatigue for the homeowners, but also get the best bang for our buck and do the right thing for the right amount of budget. And I realize that funding is a concern, and a bird in hand is, it is sometimes what we have and what we have to work with. But I just wanted to put that out there as well to let you know that, as Director Koch has said in the past, this is a reconstruct. This isn't just a let's go raise these things. There's a lot of areas where, we have to reconstruct to be able to raise. So I just wanted to leave that with you as a closing.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The last couple of slides that we have here are to provide you with some additional context surrounding the manager's phase 1 guidance for 2026, and to put in context what the severity and impact to the community may be for the type of events that we're trying to protect against. So as you can see here, should we see a 90,000 CFS event, we're talking over 2,000 residential properties that would likely be impacted, total assessed value of over $1.5 billion in infrastructure. And I actually brought up the junoflood.org website over the next couple of slides, just to give you a general idea of what the difference is in inundation. It's just to give a graphical representation of an approximation between what a 63,500 CFS event and a 90,000 CFS event looks like. So next slide, please. And again, these are all available on junoflood.org. These are obviously without the HESCO condition. So, thank you, Madam Clerk. What I wanted to point out to you here was once you move up to an approximate 90,000 CFS event, the inundation moves substantially to the east to and including past in some areas, Mendenhall Boulevard. You do see additional inundation to the west as well in the undeveloped area, but for the purposes of this, I wanted to point out how significant it does shift to the east. Next slide, please. And then here's the southern reach of the Mendenhall River at the 63,500 approximate event. And next slide, please. And you can just see, especially as we get into the lower reaches of the river, how significant of a difference it is between the two. So I bring this to you to point out that at some point, from an engineering perspective, we do believe that a 90,000 CFS event is the appropriate level of protection under the circumstances that we believe we're likely to face. And if we move forward with a 63,500 CFS decision today through the assembly, we'll want to continue to look at what it would take to get to that point in the future. And with that, I was going to turn it over to the manager to talk about her memo, unless there are any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Smith, I got a question before.
Ms. Wall.
Thank you. The hydrologic model that shows, at a 90,000 CFS, like, it spreads out, but at what point do we get like river change, like complete, change of where the river goes? Maybe the Corps folks can, like, are we is that a risk at that level? Or, I'm assuming those images are the best available science, but it just seems crazy to think about that much water.
Mr. Records, thank you.
I think that it's really hard to know exactly how the evolution will occur, and why that's particularly hard is because of how limited the geologic mapping is of the Mendenhall Valley. So, we have even seen during these recent events the amount of evolution that has occurred in the river, and that will likely continue occurring and would be more severe at higher peak events, but it is hard. And like large scale changes that you would likely anticipate happening over time would be things like, as has happened downstream already, where oxbows get cut through or new oxbows start forming. Those are some large scale changes that you would expect.
Mr. Steininger.
So the modeling presented in your presentation, it shows flooding without HESCO barriers, if I read those notes correctly. Is it possible to model what a 90,000 foot event would look like with HESCO's built to 63.5? Like if we take the 63.5 approach and we get it, we're way unlucky. Is it even possible to model that?
Thank you, Mr. Steininger, for the question. I am going to call Mr. Records back up, but I also want to say we've been asking all of those questions, and there's one element that I want to talk about that is not associated specifically with the modeling piece of this, but with HESCO's as a flood barrier. A sheet pile wall would perform better than a HESCO barrier during an overtopping event. An overtopping event could cause something like a HESCO barrier to fail as a system in a different way. And so I think that is something that we should always be taking into consideration about what the risks are of carrying out flood fighting activities or not. But Mr. Records, if you would talk to the modeling piece.
Let me just restate the question, make sure I understand it. The question is it possible to model essentially overtopping of the HESCOs to a higher peak discharge than they are sized for? Okay. I think that Nate started it off correctly, that one of the big challenges with that modeling is understanding what would happen to the HESCOs when they are overtopped. When we think about a more permanent solution like a levee, we basically develop these curves that describe the robustness of the levee to overtopping. And something like that does not exist to the HESCO for the HESCOs. They are not really designed to be overtopped. There are things that you can do to make them more robust, which we have discussed and I think are being implemented, such as putting some level of armor rock on top of the HESCOs to protect the sand that's within them, or putting some sort of basically sill or geotextile over them to again keep the sand in there. And that's also something that I was trying to get at earlier, which I briefly touched on with one of my earlier slides, is that one major consequence of overtopping is that you can significantly increase inundation behind the HESCOs because they are then going to retain water. But to answer your question, it would be challenging to perfectly model it. You could absolutely model it at some level. There would be inherent uncertainty that is greater than would often be seen in an overtopping model because of the extent of damage or failure of the HESCOs that would occur during overtopping. But I think one could expect that there would be significant damage to HESCOs if they overtopped, which would affect their performance.
I had a question, and I'm sorry if I missed it during your presentation earlier on the medium-term solutions. Is the Army Corps planning to raise the HESCOs to a level for 90,000 cubic feet per second? And if so, when would that be? And then also who pays for that?
Good evening again, sir. So currently, right now, the Corps of Engineers is working through a future request with city and borough staff. And right now, pending the decision this evening is going to impact their requests coming to the Corps of Engineers. But we have discussed 90,000 CFS to be implemented in the 2027 timeframe. The process would be a very similar process to what we did back in October, November of 25. We get a request for assistance. The Corps of Engineers reviews that request, decides if there's an engineeringly sound alternative and what is constructible prior to, in this case, a 2027 event. The funding itself, again, would be similar to this year, would be federally funded 100%. All real estate and all environmental permits would be the responsibility of the city and borough staff.
Thank you, Mr. Downing. Appreciate that. Further questions? Ms. Hall?
So you said that would be for the 2027, but hearing it would make more practical sense to construct to the 90 CFS this year versus waiting till 2027. Would that be kind of what you would recommend as well?
From the Corps of Engineer perspective, we will accept a request at any time. We can get a request tomorrow for 90,000 CFS. We would have to look at constructability concerns because right now we have roughly 2.5 months remaining until we are trying to get flood protection. To supplement the phase one efforts, the Corps again can review a request from city and borough staff to supplement the efforts to get to a 90,000 CFS, if that is the decision that comes out of this evening, and then a request submitted through the Corps of Engineers. And in that case, that would be something the Corps would look at for 2026.
Mr. Brooks?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So forgive me if it's not, super streamlined. I am halfway thinking out loud here. What's the feasibility of, if we were to do the 63.5 option, but do the footer for the 90,000 option, it's not like we could go back later and just set an extra layer on top if it's engineered for it. Could we do that, or would we have to disassemble everything and get back in there?
Sir, clarifying question, are you referring to phase 1 or phase 2 or both sections?
For the sake of the hypothetical, for both, essentially, if we put the footer and foundation in for larger, could we go to the 63 and later come in and fairly easily add to the 90?
In certain circumstances, certain areas, yes, that would be doable. But again, as Mr. Bohan, Mr. Rumsey have said, there will be sections that would have to be deconstructed and reconstructed to maintain access in future reconstruction efforts. But in certain areas, yes, there would be areas that you can literally place additional barriers on top, fill them, and then get to that 90,000 CFS.
Okay. A lot of good questions. We have, multiple areas that the manager would like direction on. One of them being reinforcing and raising phase 1. Asked a lot of good questions. How do are people ready for a motion to try that? And sorry? Oh, very good. Sure. Madam Manager, go set us up here.
Thank you. I will not walk you through this memo because you have been walked up, down, around, and square danced a little bit with it today. But there are a couple of things that bear repeating. And one is when we did have Secretary Tell here, he mentioned that a long-term or an enduring solution could be 10 to 15 years away. And this is the very reason why Army Corps of Engineers has insisted on this midterm solution, right? So this is why you're seeing so much effort being put in. We know HESCO barriers are not a permanent solution. How do we bridge that gap? But it certainly is a sobering number. So that's why we're talking about these much larger protection projects. I also just want to, before we kind of talk about the options, I do want to highlight, we've been very grateful and we continue to be very grateful for the support of Army Corps of Engineers. I think our Senator Sullivan has been so instrumental in leveraging that support by making sure that we have the attention of their leadership. And you saw that with the high level members that he's been able to get here and the tremendous focus they've been able to pay to it. So I just, we could not do this work without the Army Corps of Engineers. You have been a key partner and will continue to be a key partner. We are in this for the long term. So just want to reiterate that appreciation. I think the last round of questioning really started to get to a place where Director Kacha and I got last week trying to tee this information up for you. The Army Corps of Engineers steps in when a local municipality has exceeded its ability and its resources to respond to a catastrophic event. And they have done that in phase 2 because we were very clear, last year, September of 2025, when we were like, we have no idea how we would pay for, mobilize, and pull off this level of a project. And so we made that request. They stepped in and did that. We have started that conversation with Army Corps about phase 1 and taking phase 1 to from 63.5 to 90,000. That's it's a new request because our existing agreement that we have with them is that we are wholly in charge of phase 1 and they are in charge of phase 2 until, of course, it comes to maintenance. So I just want you to know that leadership has been very open to trying to find the yes and find those solutions, and they can't answer that question to us today, but we have been engaging in those conversations because, when I look at our budget and when I look at our available funding, even with an SRF loan, I don't see the $20 million to go to 90,000 CFS this year, even if it makes the most sense. So all that is to tee you up for the conversation where you have three options. The first option is $7.5 to $9 million, and that is just to reinforce the HESCO barriers to the flood of record. And so we would reinforce in a few key places like on Killowitch, because those places sustain the most damage. The second option that we have brought to you today is to raise the barriers to protect against 63,500 CFS. This is corresponds to what the Army Corps of Engineers is doing. And then third option at $19.8 million is to raise the barriers to 90,000 CFS. And just want to acknowledge when we started this journey, we did think that that was our recommendation, which is why I communicated to property owners that we would be doing that work, and have since kind of had a cost estimate reality check, which is why my recommendation to you is to authorize us to proceed with a project that builds the barriers to 63,500 CFS. If you make that motion and support that motion, I will come back with an ordinance to introduce at the May 18th meeting, and that will also give us more time to help figure out a better way to explain the math to you.
Shall we try a motion to get us going? Madam Mayor.
Sure. I move that we authorize alternative 2 to reinforce and raise phase 1 HESCO barriers and associated bank arming in time for the 2026 GLOF to protect against a 63,500 CFS GLOF.
Heard the motion. Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I guess I've got a question. If we were to, this is a huge policy decision. And so I do feel like I would want to set us up so that we are giving the public an opportunity to weigh on, this is a big risk. We're talking about, a 20% chance that we'll see a 90,000 CFS event in the next 10 years. And so, and not a much smaller percent that we're going to do it in the next year, but a huge price tag if we wait a year to make the decision to go to the 90,000. So my question, I guess, is if this motion is to pass, do we still have the opportunity to make a different decision to go higher, or do we have enough time to preserve both options so we can do some thinking? I mean, we need a funding plan to get to 90,000 too. We'd have to deappropriate a bunch of things that I never thought we'd ever have to deappropriate, but do we still have that option on the table to weigh that? Because I know the 63,000 is the easy option right now, and it's not easy, but it's hard not to keep the other one on the table given what we know.
So I will answer that from the kind of procedural funding perspective, and then I will ask Director Koch to answer it from the project perspective, because we are on parallel paths on this project, right? Where we're spending and doing work as we're making these decisions. And so I do think that we will need that appropriating authority regardless. So there is time to increase that appropriation. Not a lot, but there is time. The question I have for Director Koch and the Engineering and Public Works Department is if you get that direction tonight, and it changes in 3 weeks or a month's time, does that work within the construction schedule?
I'm ceding the microphone to Chief Engineer Boatman.
Thank you. So it somewhat depends. We have some very challenging areas that will not change whether they're 63.5 or 90,000. but we also have other areas that would make a substantial difference at this point, and we're moving towards both of them at the same time. We have 4 contractors and 5 or 6 crews with those 4 from those 4 contractors working on multi-phases. And so we're going to have to look closely to see what the changes are where they're working, to see, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. Some of the areas will not be impacted because the heights are the same, but other areas will have, like Meander Way, we're starting to break into those, establish access to that substantial area on Meander Way where we are 2 high or 3 high. So using an area like that, we will have to make a decision and stick with it and not go backwards. And so while we can probably shuffle things around for a short term to avoid some of those changes, we're probably 2 to 3 weeks from having to make those hard decisions. So.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you, and I'll just speak to my motion. Not easy, Ms. Wall, just so you know. But where I'm coming from on this is the Army Corps of Engineers going to 63,500. And so we have a little risk in the near time. We have no money, and we're still trying to wait and see how our budget balances out with revenue and everything else. So I'm saying give it a little bit of time. I know it will be more expensive, but if the Army Corps of Engineers thinks that they have to go to 90,000 at some time, then we're going to ask Mr. Downey to take over phase 1. That's what I'm thinking. Besides maintenance, of course.
Ms. Hall.
I'm gonna object just because I feel like we have the information we need now, except for the funding piece, which is super crucial, but to kind of pause and stay at the 63.5 when we know it should be 90. I feel like that's what we need to direct our team to keep moving towards, but I don't know, maybe I'm trying to be practical, but without the funding, I don't know if it's doable, but I will object to phase 2 because it doesn't seem like that's what needs to happen.
I'll object for purpose of a question. Director Koch, we're applying for an 18 million DC. I mean, could it be raised to 20, which would be the, option 3 estimated project amount? Or where was
Thank you, Mr. Smith. We could apply for more. However, we lose our forgiveness above the 18 million we applied for. The 18 million was based on the presidential disaster declaration that was provided for the 2024 GLOF, and that has since expired. So I don't believe we're able to raise our loan limit on that and maintain forgiveness on that. So any loan we took, we can apply for much more loan funding, but it won't be forgivable.
And then I guess a follow-up on that is, would we be able to apply for that same forgivable loan again for a $10 million project cost to raise from 63.5 to 90 in phase 1 next year? Or another, in the future.
I believe we would accept the funding we've been offered by applying for it now and just not draw it down until we need to pursue the future projects. So in order to sustain our forgivability or the forgiveness portion of the loan, we can't give this back and then reapply. So we would take this and, we would accept the loan and then just meter it out as necessary, if that makes sense.
I think so. So we would accept a larger loan than the project cost, and we could then use the remaining funds for a future project. Is that right?
As I understand the terms of the loan, yes, we did speak about moving forward, not just the work this specific year, but using the intent was to use the funding we needed this year and then continue to make repairs and fortifications on knowing that we had ongoing costs. So that was the intent of how we move forward with the loan.
Good, thank you. I'll remove my objection. Mr. Brooks.
I just thought, it would be worth mentioning that, any of them are possible and there's avenues forward for all of them. And, we could very well do an option 3 but it would be up to the will of the body to, consider the amount that we'll be talking about later for the RSA with Gold Belt, whether we do a partial repayment or hold off on the repayment, and then also looking at maybe reducing the renovation costs of the new city hall to make up some of these costs. But I do see a path forward for the option 3. But it, I don't know what the will of the body would be, but that's just my thought.
Well, we have a motion and objection. Ms. Wall.
I still don't know how I feel about this one. I thought I was with Ms. Hall until I listened to Mr. Brooks speak, because I think we're going to have a really hard time coming to agreement on that, on where that funding's coming from if we get to that place. The community is not, with us yet. I just figured out what's going on, about 45 minutes ago in terms of how serious this is. And I did read my packet and everything yesterday. So that makes me want to take a more measured approach here. So it's a lot to weigh. And we will see how I vote.
Thank you, Ms. Wall. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I think I am with Miss Wall in that a lot of this is being exposed to us in a pretty short amount of time. I too am interested in hearing what the community has to think about this, because this is, I realize that we're up here to make these big decisions, but as impactful as these will be for years to come, I feel like we should find some way to have multiple paths forward, given that our engineering staff needs to have some of these decisions finalized within 2 to 3 weeks. I'm wondering if we maybe go forward with introducing a couple of these options. We have some sort of follow-up meeting where we've had some sort of time for the community to email us, react, or maybe we have some. I'm not sure what the outreach would look like, but I think I would feel a little more comfortable giving the assembly options so we can respond to the community.
We have a motion. We have objection. Ms. Euskandis, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to object for purposes of weighing in. I appreciate where everyone's coming from. It's super terrible making these decisions when it's so technical, and we're going with the best data we have at the moment, which has changed multiple times since we started this adventure. I do agree that there's a path if we're committed to finding that path. I agree. there's a multitude of options we could take. I also agree that it would be hard. We'd probably all want to get there different ways. I'm thinking about bonds right now, and I'm thinking about moving CIPs around. But I also wish we had more time, which we don't. I think I am very sympathetic to both. I want to hear what people have to say, and I'm of a similar mind of wanting to not move something off the table, and yet knowing it has to be moved off the table. But I think I am going to remove my objection. And you can hear how pausy I am. So nothing about this is easy. So I think I'm going to remove my objection for now, but I completely understand the desire to keep it open. I think even as we know even as we feel like we know the science is saying maybe that we should be going to this level, or we expect to go to this level based on what we're hearing from the core. Even with something costing more, it does not preclude that. So I'm trying to find that level and what that balance is. So I'll remove my objection.
Thank you, Ms. Candies. I guess I'll just chime in knowing there's, anyway, I understand folks. I mean, my big question is, do we just go big and go to 90K in 1 year? The math I'm kind of doing based on that, we can only get we can only get an $18 million loan and still have the forgivability. If we go with that item and we, get the loan and everything, I mean, we will pretty much draw down our GLOF CIP to $1 million. Who knows about cost overruns or whatever other things that may come in the next year. We know we're having significant concerns on being able to find additional funds. I totally hear it. I want to keep people safe and do the project, and I just am concerned that if we draw that fund down to nearly zero or $1 million or something, that we really just don't have much ammo to do other things that may come up, and that there's maybe hope in the future for additional funding or different ways to pay for the movement from 63.5 to 90 next year. Totally hear but if we had more money, I would probably be like, yes, go ahead and let's just go to let's just do the 90K, but it would tap us out, and we know we don't have great sources to replenish that quickly. So I'll support the mayor's motion. With that, we have a motion and objection. Ms. Hendricks, would you call the roll?
I'm removing my objection if it's important at all.
And we still have objection.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Smith. For Madam Mayor's motion to authorize alternative 2 to reinforce and raise Phase 1 HESCO barriers and associated bank armoring in time for the 2026 GLOF to protect against a 63,500 CFS GLOF. Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Ms. Hall.
No.
Mr. Brooks.
Yes.
Mr. Steininger.
Yes.
Ms. Adkisson.
Yes.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Ms. Wall.
No.
Ms. Hughes Candies.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Smith.
Yes.
Motion carries with 7 yeas and 2 nays.
Thank you, Ms. Hendricks. Let's maybe take 10 before we move on to the next part of this discussion. Come back at 9:05. I will bring us back into order. We have another discussion item regarding outburst flooding and funding. We've asked a lot of questions and all very good. I guess, Madam Manager, onto your second memo. Good information. My sense in terms of needing to determine, a future funding source like that is not a need to determine that right now. Am I correct there in terms of, I mean, we may have questions on a taxing district or something, but anyway, I guess tell us the pertinence and maybe what direction you may need on any specific item.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Smith. You're correct. I'm not asking for a recommendation on this memo, but the memo is before you because as I worked through the last issue like you have, I just realized that the severity of this problem and the cost of this problem to our community is very real and ongoing. And we are providing a new service, a service that we never provided before. And if we have a, $15 to $20 million project this year, what will our project be next year in just maintenance for these HESCO barriers when it encompasses the entire length of the river? So I wanted to just talk about that in the context of fairness, because we have the 400 property owners that are a part of the LID that haven't been assessed anything yet, right? We haven't finalized, you have not finalized that assessment rule. So they haven't been charged anything yet, but it's hanging out over their, over their heads as this assessment. And when you made that policy decision, you made it, of course, understanding that it was imperfect information. And in reality, we would be protecting a greater number of people. And so just wanted to talk about the different mechanisms. You have a special service area where you leverage a property tax to a carved out group of benefited property owners, an area-wide property tax, and the kind of pros and cons of that. One piece I just will note on the LID, the homeowner's portion of that phase one LID is about $2.3 million. So when you think about it in the context of the millions and millions of dollars that are being spent by the Army Corps of Engineers and by the city and borough of Juneau, it's a small portion of that. Significant, of course, to those property owners because it's $6,600 each property. But a lot of them have been raising these questions with you in email, and I just think it's important to acknowledge that exists, and indeed that is why you have waited so long. One of the reasons why you have waited to certify this LID is because trying to tackle that fairness issue. I don't think it's something that you need to tackle before the GLOF season because you've identified funding sources to be able to proceed till next year. But this is, again, a new service. And when we provide a new service, we have to identify a funding source. So happy to answer questions or happy to maybe if you want to ask me questions or ask me questions offline that I can bring back to you at another time to continue this conversation, however you'd like to handle that, Chair Smith.
Thank you, Madam Manager. So we have, this and then two more items on the agenda. I think we can push off the fourth item, the City Hall disposal. We do need to take action on the next item, which is the Eagle Crest Gondola Gold Belt RSA. I guess maybe knowing that we then have 50 minutes, my thought would maybe be how are people feeling about like focusing in on, if people have questions or thoughts on what to do on the phase one LID, and then maybe if it's, bigger picture on taxes for new service or something, we can either do that offline, ask the manager, or I'm sure you could bring back, I think you've written a memo on that in the past, and we could bring that back at a time when it's right. But I mean, that's kind of where I'm thinking is, the thing that we might want to talk about or ask about is a possible direction on the LID, but people have other areas of interest, we can look at that too. Madam Mayor, did you have a question?
I didn't have a question. I just was gonna just say what I was kind of thinking about this. Initially, we did the LID because at that time we thought it was smaller, and now looking at the chart of how many houses we're protecting, I think we need to share the burden a little more broadly. So I don't want to talk about new funding source tonight because I think we're just all a little flood fatigued at this moment. And I don't even think I'll make a motion, but I would say we should look at removing the LID and figuring out a different funding source that affects more people, because we're putting a burden on just that small group of people that we were initially trying to protect, but now we're protecting a big chunk of the valley. So that's just where I'm coming from.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Ms. Wall.
Just real quick, I agree with the mayor. Am I correct in assuming that none of those kind of ongoing tax district funding sources, those would only be able to like forward fund stuff? I agree with you, we would still have to find something else to relieve the lid, or could you apply a tax that relieves that, even though it was a long time ago?
Through the chair, thank you. So it would be forward funding only. You can't go back.
I had a question. If we do, well, I don't know the right word, but do away with the lid or repeal the lid, what's the impact to city? Sorry if you said it, but where do we need to find $2.3 million to, or sorry, yeah, help me there. Sorry. What's the financial impact?
So the property owner's share of the lid is $2.3 million, but you would not have to find that. That money has been appropriated when the project was originally initiated. There, if you recall, there's been a lot of postponing the conversation of how we share the grant money, the forgivable loan money, and those different pieces between the CBJ taxpayers at large and the lid property owners. So the answer is no, you do not have to come up with $2.3 million.
Okay, and just to follow up, I think it's maybe the similar thing. If the lid did go forward and we, enacted it, or sorry, the words are failing me, and they start repaying, that would be coming in as new revenue that we have not like previously anticipated, or paying back something from the restricted budget reserve. It would be like new revenue if they were to pay it back. I think it's kind of saying the same thing, but in a slightly different side of the coin.
I'm sorry, I thought I knew the answer until the finance director. Maybe we can call Director Flick over on this one.
Director Flick, if you're there. Can you hear us? Oh.
Yes, I can hear you. I'm just playing with my buttons. There we go.
Would you like me to repeat my question, I guess?
Yes, please. That would be fantastic.
Okay. I guess I just want to say, if we repeal the lid, we don't need to find additional money. We haven't already accounted for that money in, at all. Like, if we repeal the lid, there's really no financial impact to any of our fund balances or CIPs or revenue or anything.
That's correct, Deputy Mayor Smith. If you decide to dissolve the lid, not make it a thing, there's no need to find additional funding. If you decide to make the lid happen, we would attribute the appropriate percentage of costs to that central treasury loan that was originally included in the ordinance at the start of the lid process. And the payments from the property owners would pay back that central treasury loan over time. So that's also not new revenue to you, but it would free up some general fund dollars that are currently that have currently paid for construction of the phase one.
I, I think I'm good. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I do just have a quick one. I will revisit, or if we can, it'd be helpful if we look at them in a future meeting. I do know that there were old memos, so I will revisit some of those about tax districts. My question was just because the new service, new tax, and there's an example with the 1 mill rate for the boundaries, what that would generate. And I'm wondering how that interacts with the property tax rate cap. That's not, the area wide is one thing, but because this is a service, this lives outside of that.
It would be, it would require a vote to set up that district, and the ballot measure as written allows that tax to be raised by a vote.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. In our email correspondence before the meeting, you also giving me that same understanding. Just to understand, like, how is that different than setting up like the road service area or the fire service area? Why would a special taxes district be different? Is it specifically because of the new a Proposition 1 that passed last year, or is this always the process?
So the city attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, but to establish a special district, you require a vote, and then the assembly sets that mill rate. And so the roaded service area at one point had to have a vote, and the assembly annually sets that mill rate. You could set that mill rate, last year you could have set the roaded service area mill rate higher to pay for expenditures, or lower. You made a decision based on the funding that you needed. You no longer have that flexibility just because of the total mill rate cap. It doesn't mean you can't, change it within the 9 mills. But because of the cap, you're just bumping up against that cap. So does that help answer your question?
I might have some more follow-up offline.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And you want to talk just a little bit about, so the vote would be in the area that would be in the 20-foot inundation maps, and you have to live in the area. You want to talk about all those things so the public understands exactly what area it is and who's deciding that.
Yeah, thank you. So the example that we use is the 20-foot inundation area, or the 90,000 CFS, roughly equivalent. And it would be a vote, probably a special election, because the unique nature of it, it makes more sense to do it as a special election. But you would be eligible to vote if you are registered to vote within those boundaries, whether or not you're a renter or a homeowner. And if you have property, you would not have a vote. That's different from an LID, where it's one parcel, one vote. That's actually weighted by the value of your property. So it's a very different mechanism than a LID, and is used for different things. And LID needs to be used for new construction. So the maintenance work wouldn't be a great fit for an LID.
I'll just chime in back to the mayor's comment earlier. As I see it now, I'm also in favor of dissolving the LID, and then looking in the future at possible ways to pay for ongoing maintenance. Unless anyone else has any comments or questions on that. It seems like we can deal with it. Yeah, we can deal with it. Okay. Moving to the next item. Disposition, item 2. Disposition of Pulse Gondola. Madam Manager.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I hate to tell you this, but there is more complicated math involved in this item. So I am going to try to keep us very high level. The two things that we have to do tonight to keep on a schedule for repaying Gold Belt and terminating the RSA without incurring additional interest charges is forward Ordinance 2025-01 BAL and Ordinance 2026-18 to the regular assembly meeting for public hearing. So in the end, that is what I am asking for of you tonight to keep us on schedule. There, however, are other policy decisions surrounding the gondola project that are worth discussing and coming to some level of either conclusion on or request for additional information. So I tried to categorize the options for moving forward with the gondola project as option A and option B. So after you take the action to pay off Gold Belt, you will have $766,000 in the project CIP. So that is the funding that you will have to be able to make decisions surrounding how to close out the project or move forward with another iteration of the project. So item A is the let's wash our hands of this project option. And I don't want to get too far in the details of all the different things that item A entails, but it anticipates a recovery. So after we've spent money on making things happen, like selling parts and doing all of those things, it anticipates a recovery of $1.6 million, but a timeline of 2 to 3 years to get there, mostly because selling the gondola parts will take time and we will have to hire someone to do that business. So option A is like, let's try to get out of this. Let's just, terminate this project. Option B is a little bit confusing because it breaks it out into 2 different Bs. So there's B1 and B2. But really what option B is, let's spend some money to sit on this decision for a while and keep the gondola distributed across hither and yon and make sure we still have the option to move forward with a gondola project at Eagle Crest. Because the thing about the first Pulse gondola that we bought, that gondola can be sold as a unit. But then in order to install it at Eagle Crest, we had to buy towers and parts of a second gondola. Those pieces are still in Europe. So the gondola as designed, the investment that we've put into designing the gondola requires all of those parts. So in essence, you are spending money to hold that option open so that all of those pieces remain in play. And the cost estimate for that is $417,000. So within option B, which is basically keep our options open, option B, you have marketing the gondola as a standalone summer operation. So maybe there's a tour company, maybe there's a cruise line that wants to operate the gondola, just the gondola. Option 2 is marketing the gondola to the Eagle Crest ski area and the Eagle Crest ski area to a third party with the intent to take on all winter and summer operations. And obviously, if that's the option that you decide or that you want more information on, there are some basic questions that need to be answered. I think one of the largest questions remaining out there of let's hand Eagle Crest in its entirety over to a third-party operator is the restrictions from the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And the memo does go into detail about those. But we believe it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to meet the requirements of transferring ownership of Eagle Crest to another entity because of those restrictions. You'd have to find land that is the same value, that's not in recreation status. You'd have to pay for that. You'd have to pay for lots of appraisals. You'd have to get the National Park Service to approve it. There's just a lot of hurdles. All of that is to say, when we look back in the record, Eagle Crest has thought about this multiple times, and even to get like a zip line a permit for doing a zip line or some of these activities, it requires some approval because of this land and water conservation fund. So like the more like a commercial operation it looks, the more difficult that land and water conservation fund. All of that is just to say those are some of the things that will be difficult as if we move forward with option B. So the purpose of bringing option A and option B to you today is to really try to move forward with some type of closure or next stage for what the gondola project looks like. Understanding that, you know, there's still a lot of pieces in the air and across the world, and trying to bring that to a close is not easy, but it's definitely something that needs to be, we need to start sooner rather than later. So I think with that, I will stop and am available for questions.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Knowing that we need to take action on the 2 ordinances, let's maybe focus on that first, if that sounds all right. Any questions or anything? Is there any questions on either of those 2 ordinances? Very good. We'll start with a motion to get us going. Madam Mayor.
I'm just reading the thing. I move ordinance 2025-01, little case B, uppercase AL, and ordinance 2026-18 to the full assembly and ask for unanimous consent.
Very good. The May 18 regular assembly meeting. Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Any objections to that motion? Mr. Brooks?
I'd object just because I think that the maximum value to be obtained from the gondola is to sell it as a system as opposed to parting it out.
I guess do those RSAs or those 2 ordinance, do they have any impacts on the parks? Okay. I just wanted to make. I will still object. I don't think that we should just drain that fund balance to pay this off before exercising the options and negotiations or looking at other possibilities. Thank you, Ms. Brooks. Any other comments? Ms. Hall?
I assume city manager has been, can we hear from Eagle Crest Board on these 2 options before us, or is that possible this evening? Okay, okay. All right, I'll wait for further discussion.
Okay. So we have a motion just moving these 2 ordinance regarding the RSA forward. We have objection. We have a motion and we have objection. Mr. Sandiger.
Just for a question, and spurred by Mr. Brooks' objection. If we move these forward to the full assembly, pass them out of the full assembly, and after that date, say you found some terms by which we wouldn't have to repay Gold Belt the full amount, would this preclude us from kind of changing that direction at any point? Like, is moving this forward kind of closing the door on any other kind of negotiation you might be able to make?
Thank you for that question. So it does not preclude any conversation about a different path forward, option B2, with Gold Belt or any other operator. It does pay off the RSA. So what would no longer be an option is a negotiation where in exchange for not paying off the RSA, you give X, Y, or Z. we could say, okay, we want, in exchange for the $10 million or $12 million we just paid to pay off the RSA, we will do X, Y, Z. But that particular piece, we would, as quickly as possible, pay off the RSA and terminate the agreement.
And I guess just I'll object for a question. I mean, but it doesn't preclude further negotiations with Goldbelt for operating. I mean, I think you kind of just said that. So, okay, thank you. Just reiterating that I heard the correct thing. Very good. We have a motion and we have objection. Ms. Hendricks, would you call the roll?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Smith. For Madam Mayor's motion to forward ordinance 2025-01 lowercase b uppercase AL and ordinance 2026-18 to the May 18th regular assembly meeting for public hearing. Madam Mayor,
Yes.
Mr. Brooks,
No.
Ms. Wall,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Ms. Adkisson,
Yes.
Mr. Steininger,
Yes.
Ms. Hall,
Yes.
Ms. Hughes Candies,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Smith.
Yes.
Motion carries with 8 yeas and 1 nay.
Thank you, Ms. Hendricks. We have a little less than 30 minutes for discussion on the second part regarding options for the Pulse gondola. Questions or any questions on this topic? I mean, we have, yeah, Madam Manager.
May I suggest if you, you could take this opportunity to think of the questions that you would want to ask the Eagle Crest Board. And I don't know if we do have a board member in the audience. I do not know if he feels empowered to speak on behalf of the board and all the questions you might ask him. But certainly, if you have some questions, we could work together to bring those back to you if you thought that was an appropriate path.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Madam Mayor.
So my question would be option A1 that you don't have on here. And that would be to sell the gondola. But by doing that, we could still approach other people and seeing if they're interested in summer operations, which could include another gondola, but they would have to pay for it, and or ski operations. Is that correct? And we could certainly have the board weigh in on that.
I'd have a question, and I guess you know, I'm seeing the marketing component, and to me, I guess just to confirm, is there current funding for the Eagle Crest Board? Is there current funding, city funding, to market Eagle Crest either as a ski area and a summer operations, or with the gondola, or you would need direction, and that there's not existing money for those type of marketing efforts. Is that right?
Now we're going to eclipse my understanding, but you are correct. There is no, either one of these scenarios, option A or option B, you need funding for, you know, marketing, selling the gondola, or marketing Eagle Crest to a third party, whether that be a third party to operate the gondola or to operate any number of wonderful winter and summer adventures at Eagle Crest. I do know that the Eagle Crest Board is looking at doing some of that work, but they would definitely need the support to be able to like develop that, you know, marketing plan and do all of that work.
Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Manager Custer, I think you just said you'd need funding for both of those options, depending on which one you went down. Is it correct that if we were to terminate the project and just keep all parts and equipment at a loss, that would be an option where you would not need additional funding? Or if not, could you expand on that one.
The answer to your question is no. We cannot just indefinitely keep the parts without it costing significantly more. And the reason for that is because a critical component of the gondola at Eagle Crest is in Austria right now. And so in order to bring those parts across the pond, we would have to pay for tariffs and fuel surcharges on that. And we estimate that to be about $1 million.
Mr. Brooks? Is it? Oh, I was thinking it was somebody banging at the door. So,
Need a plumber to go check it out?
Brooks, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I've said multiple times, I think that we very much, you know, sell it as a complete system, but if we were to go down the route of getting rid of it on a part by part basis, could we not recycle it in the country where those parts are stored and actually get money for the recycled steel?
If we were to dispose of the parts in Austria, we would want to sell it as as gondola parts, and we would want to hire a broker to do that work. So we think there's actually more value in trying to find a buyer for those parts, but that will take time and some upfront expense.
Can I actually hop in really quick? I see her, but I'm going first. I'm looking at your cost to terminate the projects and sell all parts. You know, obviously some of these things may not just happen overnight, or it may take time, as I think we can imagine, or you've written. To just keep things where they are, I'm just trying to catch up in just, you know, what the initial costs and then what the ongoing costs are. So if we just keep things where we are, I'm looking at your table at the bottom of page 25. It's $250K to transport, and that's when your storage. After that, it's $1,800 a month, and that's for the I don't actually know what pieces there are, but the pieces in Austria, I'm sure. And then the other ongoing cost is the $7,200 a year for dry indoor storage in Colorado. Those would be the ongoing costs. The other ones are maybe one time, like the $50,000 for inventorying and $60,000 for shipping hangers and grips to Colorado.
So the chart that you're looking at is the cost for disposal.
Mm-hmm.
So assuming that disposal doesn't happen immediately, there will be some storage and some like bringing parts together expenses.
Okay, sounds good. But I mean, looking at that, and you're saying projected expenses for trying to sell them where they are, it looks like around, you know, $367,000 for maybe the first year or so. So there'd be, should those RSA, the terminating the RSAs, there'd be 766. So there'd still be around 400,000 in that, which could get tapped as if storage takes longer and other things. Okay, thank you. Sorry, Ms. Candies, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think some of this, I think I'll follow up with offline. And I'll just note that I understand that the cost for selling all of these are, I think, you know, a little bit hard to estimate. And I think staff has done a fine job estimating how long it would take and where you're selling these things. It's a lot of moving parts. I guess for this body, the reason I was asking about that is I do, from a policy decision place, think that there may come a time where it may serve this body better to not get the full value for the objects, which would be a very different sale. But trying to estimate between the two is, this is good for right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Candies. Madam Mayor.
I recall hearing this at one time, but I think we need, for the cars to be worthwhile, I think we need the hangers and grips to go to Colorado, right?
Now you're in the weeds, Mayor Weldon. Yes.
I'm out of the weeds. That was my last question.
I guess, either a question or a comment from me, where I currently am, and I guess we could, I'd be open to running this by the Eagle Crest board, is to pursue option A, selling the, gondola as kind of proposed there, but also directing the city manager to be able to spend up to an amount. I'm thinking 100,000 from the gondolas project CIP to support the Eagle Crest board's efforts to market Eagle Crest and or some operations at Eagle Crest to third parties. I think we know the financial circumstances Eagle Crest is in. And I think if we have a hope of keeping it operating, I think putting some of that money that's again in that CIP to try to find someone who will operate it or do summer operations or help in some way, I think that would be, I want to say the only way that it maybe can keep going, but I think it would be an important way to actually have any hope for Eagle Crest to continue to operate after the next year or two. So that's where I am and would maybe be interested in seeing what the Eagle Crest board's feedback on that option would be. Other comments, other questions? Mrs. Candies?
I was just gonna, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just gonna make a clean comment and say, I agree. I think option A is where we are right now. I think that's an interesting idea about the marketing. I'm not sure where I am on that, but I think out of these options, I would just voice my support for option A.
Thank you, Mrs. Candies. Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify what you're stating there, you're supportive of the option A and the hybrid of A and 2?
Yes. And I mean, I'm kind of saying market Eagle Crest as a winter and summer or just summer operations. I guess I'm trying to see what people are maybe interested in, maybe it's like, anyway, keeping the options open in terms of what we market Eagle
If I
Crest
could
for.
just ask a clarifying question. Your direction would be for the Eagle Crest board to look at that in the absence of this particular Pulse gondola.
Yes. We could ask him other options as well if other people, I'm open to other ideas too. Yeah.
Should the question that we all decide on right now is whether we have any hope for the gondola whatsoever, or if we just abandon that at the wayside and then think about the marketing of the operations. Because that seems like what it is, because A2 is market gondola and Eagle Crest, but A is get rid of gondola. So it's like I think that's the real question to ask is, do we just completely give up right now on the gondola in every sense? Or do we try and market it as a package?
Yeah, I guess, and these might be good questions that we could hear feedback. We want to hear feedback from the Eagle Crest board on, a proposal of mine, which would be like option A and marketing Eagle Crest summer operations, or both winter and summer, or we could get feedback from maybe the board on different combinations of some of these options. And Ms. Uscandy or Mr. We are, but let's. keep it moving.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I don't know where this body is at wanting to, I don't want to cut the Eagle Crest Board out of this process. I think we're in a world where we are doing, we've been in increased collaboration with them, and it's hard because these two things, I don't know if they're on parallel paths, but we just talked about the budget and we had them run around about the budget. But as far as whether we're choosing an option where we are abandoning this gondola project as conceived, we have already drafted, asked staff to draft that. At a previous meeting, we looked at it. We're just sent it for public hearing where we'll vote on it. I am ready to say, yes, I'm comfortable cutting that out. And so I guess it would help me if the rest of the body is where I am at and you do not need to get Eagle Crest feedback, board feedback on that before you say, yes, we're dropping this project and we feel confident on that, then that would be good to know, because now it's not clear to me whether we're just giving feedback on this is where we are and we want Eagle Crest to weigh in on it. I do think at a certain point that's on this assembly, and we're gonna have to, I will just say again, budget realities. I would make a motion that we move to choose option A, and then maybe people can add on other motions. So I would move option A and ask unanimous consent.
Thank you, Ms. Uscandy. We have a motion. Madam Mayor.
I'll object for purpose of an amendment. I agree with Ms. Uscandy's that I think it's time to terminate, but I agree that I think we need to set aside something for marketing, and I don't know what that at this time of night, I don't know what that amount is, but still give Eagle Crest resources to, trying to say this clearly. So my amendment would be to still give Eagle Crest some resources to continue to search for a partner in either summer and or winter operations.
Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I'll object just because I would prefer to have that conversation while we're talking about their budget anyways. So I don't see the need to indicate any direction, which I think this would do right now.
Thank you, Ms. Wall. I'll support the mayor's motion. I think we need to I think we need to provide some resources to market. I don't know if it needs to be within their budget. It might be something to, anyway, if this amendment were to pass and the motion were to pass, Madam Manager, would you be, what would you do? Would you potentially find, RFP a firm to market Eagle Crest operations and potentially summer operations?
I think, I would first work with the Eagle Crest Board, because even though you would direct the manager to make the appropriation would be to Eagle Crest and to their board. And I suspect that, yes, they would need, outside consulting assistance, they would need marketing assistance and those types of things to do that.
Thank you. Madam Mayor.
I think this is going to get complicated very fast. So unless anybody objects, I'll remove my amendment, and I'm with Ms. Wall. We can deal with it when we talk about their budget.
Well, I mean, I would like to there's the money in the account. I feel like we need to get going on this I mean, I'm trying to I don't know, we need to try to move quickly because or else we're like every day is closer to another ski season and close to, anyway. I'd like to keep, I'd like to put in resources to provide some marketing for Eagle Crest now. Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. A question, this money was appropriated, but it was from Gold Belt. Can we use it for this purpose? I think if I'm understanding the money.
Yes, because this is the money left over in the account after we've paid back the full amount. So we would no longer be obligated to.
It's getting very complicated for 10 to 10 at night. Well, it sounds like, I'll put words in Mr. Smith's mouth. It sounds like he's objecting to my removal of my amendment, so I'll go back to my amendment as stated earlier. And ask for unanimous consent.
Ms. Candies.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I will object to this amendment. I agree with Ms. Wall that I'd rather look at this within the context of their budget. So I'm not saying no forever. I think it's an interesting idea. It is also a policy decision that is somewhat substantial. So that's not one that I'm prepared to make right now. And I will say if I was predisposed one way or another, how I would decide that policy decision. Again, some of the answers to the questions I've been asked about this memo, everything about this process, I am not closing the door on all future ski seasons and Eagle Crest the place, but I feel like we need to wrap this up, and that is a separate question. So, and when I look at how much it would add up to, I want an answer from Manager Custer when I say, sell the parts in Austria, that she can say, I'll sell them tomorrow, but that's not the reality of the situation. And we have parts scattered everywhere. So that $766,000 or whatever it is not even, that will get eaten up by just trying to, how long ever it takes you to sell these various components. So I think it's worthy of consideration, but I object to this.
Mr. Sandinger.
I'm gonna speak in kind of reluctant objection to the amendment, not because I disagree with the direction. It actually kind of lines up with something that I've been thinking about introducing as a concept as we talk about the Eagle Crest budget. But I will agree with the members over to the left of me over there that I think it is a conversation that fits more within the budget discussion. I also want to note that, we've given different direction to Eagle Crest at kind of every meeting that we've talked about Eagle Crest over the last several months, and not every piece necessarily meshes together well. And I think we need to kind of maybe stop giving new bits of direction, which I see this as, and maybe try to figure out a more cohesive path forward. We have them working towards a November meeting to talk about the future of Eagle Crest. We're working on the budget process for the near-term future of Eagle Crest. Yes, we probably need to throw some resourcing into that. And I like the direction you're headed. Right now, maybe not.
I'll remove my objection to the mayor withdrawing her motion.
For the record, I'll withdraw my motion. Mr. Senator, while you were very elegant, I like Ms. Hughes Candy's wrapped up in the ball.
Very good. Are there any other objections to the mayor withdrawing her amendment? Mr. Brooks.
Just to say, say a brief stint of support for that which was removed. So I'll remove after stating this, but Eagle Crest did just come to us with their budget and said what their bare minimums are and everything that they'd be having to roll back and just barely be able to get by with. So by doing this action, we would ensure that they wouldn't have to do any more work now trying to figure out, oh, how are we going to come up with a marketing budget now when they already can't do so much? So that's why I would have been in support and was in support for the 2 times it was brought up, but I will remove my objection.
We have 5 minutes. Thank you for that, Mr. Brooks. Maybe the idea is not gone forever, but we'll let it pass tonight. But good to know where you are. We have just a motion. Is there objection to Ms. Hughes-Scandy's motion? Ms. Hendricks, would you restate the motion?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Smith. For Ms. Hughes-Scandy's motion for option A, to terminate the Eagle Crest Gondola project and sell all parts and equipment.
Thank you, Ms. Hendricks. You've heard the motion. Is there objection to the motion? Seeing none, that motion is adopted. Only we had marketing dollars to market that gondola we have for sale. Let's see. Any staff reports? Next meeting is June 1, 2026. And with that, we're adjourned.